Shalom, everybody. Thank you for joining us on YouTube. And for those who have come out to join us, thank you. Today we're going to start in Deuteronomy chapter 21, verses 10 through 25, the whole chapter 25. Verse 19 is the last verse. So thank you once again for joining us, you that are on YouTube and those that are here. And I'm going to go ahead and open this up with prayer. Heavenly Father, we do thank you for the Sabbath. Thank you for the rest and peace that you give us and the blessing of your word, your Torah, Father. We thank you for the opportunity to be here and to go through your instructions and to glean from them. Father, we do pray that your Spirit would be with us, ministering to us, revealing new things to us, Father. Pray for anybody who's traveling here, that for traveling mercies, that you would be with them and get them here safely. And so we do thank you, and we give this time over to you in Yeshua's name.
Deuteronomy 21, starting with verse 10. When you go out to fight against your enemies, and Yahweh your Elohim shall give them into your hand, and you shall take them captive, and shall see among the captives a woman fair of form, shall delight in her and take her for your wife, and you shall bring her home to your house, and she shall shave her head and trim her nails, and put aside the mantle of her captivity, shall dwell in your house, and mourn her father and her mother a month of days. And after that you shall go into her and be her husband, she shall be your wife. And it shall be, if you are not pleased with her, then you shall let her go at her desire. But you do not sell her at all for silver. Do not treat her harshly, since you have humbled her. When a man has two wives, one loved and the other unloved, and they have borne him children, both the loved and the unloved, and the firstborn son is of her who is unloved, then it shall be, on the day he makes his sons to inherit his possessions, he is not allowed to treat the son of the beloved wife as firstborn in the face of the son of the unloved, who is truly the firstborn. But he is to acknowledge the son of the unloved wife as the firstborn by giving him a double portion of all that he has, for he is the beginning of his strength. The right of the firstborn is his. When a man has a wayward and rebellious son who is not listening to the voice of his father or the voice of his mother, and who, when they have disciplined him, does not listen to them, then his father and his mother shall take hold of him and bring him out to the elders of his city, to the gate of his city, and shall say to the elders of his city, this son of ours is wayward and rebellious. He is not listening to our voice. He is a glutton and a drunkard. Then all the men of his city shall stone him to death with stones. Thus you shall purge the evil from your midst, and let all Israel hear and fear. And when a man has committed a sin worthy of death, then he shall be put to death, and you shall hang him on a tree. Let his body not remain overnight on the tree, for you shall certainly bury him the same day. For he who is hanged is accursed of Elohim, so that you do not defile the land which Yahweh your Elohim has given you as an inheritance. When you see your brother's ox or a sheep straying away, you shall not hide yourself from them. Return them to your brother without fail. And if your brother is not near you, or if you do not know him, then you shall bring it to your own house, and it shall be with you until your brother seeks it. Then you shall return it to him. And so you do with his donkey, and so you do with his garment, and so you do with whatever your brother loses, which he has lost and you have found. You are not allowed to hide yourself. When you see your brother's donkey or his ox fall down on the way, you shall not hide yourself from them. Help him raise them without fail. A woman does not wear that which pertains to a man, nor does a man put on a woman's garment. For whoever does this is an abomination to Yahweh your Elohim. When you come upon a bird's nest along the way, in any tree or on the ground, with young ones or eggs, with the mother sitting on the young or on the eggs, do not take the mother with the young. Let the mother go without fail, and take the young for yourself, so that it might be well with you, that you shall prolong your days. When you build a new house, then you shall make a parapet for your roof, so that you do not bring blood guilt on your house when one falls from it. Do not sow your vineyard with different kinds of seed, lest the yield of the seed which you have sown and the fruit of your vineyard be defiled. Do not plow with an ox and a donkey together. Do not put on a garment of different kinds of wool and linen together. Make tassels on the four corners of the garment with which you cover yourself. When any man takes a wife and shall go into her, and shall hate her, and shall make abusive charges against her, and bring an evil name on her, and say, I took this woman, and when I came to her, I did not find her a maiden. Then the father and mother of the young woman shall take and bring out the proof of the girl's maidenhood to the elders of the city at the gate. And the girl's father shall say to the elders, I gave my daughter to this man as wife, and he hates her. And see, he has made abusive charges against her, saying, I did not find your daughter a maiden. And yet these are the proofs of my daughter's maidenhood. And they shall spread the garment before the elders of the city. The elders of that city shall take that man and punish him, and fine him 100 pieces of silver, and give them to the father of the young woman, because he has brought an evil name on a maiden of Israel. She is to be his wife, and he is not allowed to put her away all his days. But if the matter is true that the girl was not found a maiden, they shall bring out the girl to the door of her father's house, and the men of her city shall stone her to death with stones, because she has done wickedness in Israel, to whore in her father's house. Thus you shall purge the evil from your midst. When a man is found lying with a woman married to a husband, then both of them shall die, both the man that lay with the woman and the woman. Thus you shall purge the evil from Israel. When a girl who is a maiden is engaged to a husband, and a man finds her in the city and lies with her, then you shall bring them both out to the gate of that city, and shall stone them to death with stones. The girl because she did not cry out in the city, and the man because he has humbled his neighbor's wife. Thus you shall purge the evil from your midst. But if a man finds the girl who is engaged in the field, and the man takes hold of her and lies with her, then only the man who lay with her shall die. But you shall do no matter to the girl. The girl has no sin worthy of death, for the matter is like a man who rises against his neighbor and murders him, a being, for he found her in the field, and she cried out, the engaged girl, but without anyone to save her. When a man finds a girl who is a maiden, who is not engaged, and he seizes her and lies with her, and they are found out, then the man who lay with her shall give to the girl's father 50 pieces of silver, and she is to be his wife because he has humbled her. He is not allowed to put her away all his days. A man does not take his father's wife, nor uncover his father's skirt. He who is wounded by crushing of testicles, or whose penis is cut off, shall not enter into the community of Yahweh. A mamzer shall not enter the community of Yahweh. Even a 10th generation of his shall not enter the community of Yahweh. An Ammonite or Moabite shall not enter the assembly of Yahweh. Even a 10th generation of them shall not ever enter the assembly of Yahweh, because they did not meet you with bread and water on the way when you came out of Mitzrayim, and because they hired against you Balaam, son of Beor, from Pethor of Aram Naharaim, to curse you. But Yahweh your Elohim refused to listen to Balaam, and Yahweh your Elohim turned the curse into a blessing for you, because Yahweh your Elohim loves you. Do not seek their peace nor their good all your days forever. Do not loathe an Edomite, for he is your brother. Do not loathe a Mitzrayim, because you are a stranger in his land. Children of the 3rd generation born to them do enter the assembly of Yahweh. When the camp goes out against your enemies, then you shall guard yourself from every evil matter. When there is any man among you who is not clean because of an emission in the night, then he shall go outside the camp. Let him not come into the midst of the camp. And it shall be at the approach of evening that he bathes with water. And when the sun sets, let him come into the midst of the camp. You shall have a place outside the camp where you shall go out. And you shall have a sharp implement among your equipment. When you sit down outside, you shall dig with it, and turn and cover your excrement. For Yahweh your Elohim walks in the midst of your camp to deliver you and give your enemies over to you. Therefore your camp shall be set apart, so that he does not see unclean matter among you, and shall turn away from you. You do not hand over to his master the slave who has escaped from his master to you. Let him dwell with you in your midst, in the place which he chooses within one of your gates, where it is pleasing to him. Do not oppress him. None of the daughters of Israel is to be a cult prostitute, nor any of the sons of Israel be a cult prostitute. Do not bring the harlot fee of a whore or the pay of a dog to the house of Yahweh, your Elohim, for any vowed offering, for both of these are an abomination to Yahweh, your Elohim. Do not lend an interest to your brother, interest of silver, interest of food, or interest of whatever is lent at interest. To a foreigner you lend at interest, but to your brother you do not lend at interest, that Yahweh your Elohim might bless you in all that you put your hand to in the land which you are entering to possess. When you make a vow to Yahweh your Elohim, do not delay to pay it. Yahweh your Elohim is certainly requiring it of you, and it shall be sin in you. But when you abstain from vowing, it is not a sin in you. That which has gone from your lips you shall guard and do, for you voluntarily vowed to Yahweh your Elohim what you have promised with your mouth. When you come into your neighbor's vineyard, you shall eat to the satisfaction of your desire, but do not put any in a receptacle of yours. When you come into your neighbor's standing grain, you shall pluck the heads with your hand, but do not use a sickle on your neighbor's standing grain.
Chapter 24. When a man takes a wife and shall marry her, then it shall be, if she finds no favor in his eyes because he has found a matter of uncoveredness in her, and he shall write her a certificate of divorce, and put it in her hand, and send her out of his house. And if she left his house and went and became another man's wife, and the latter husband shall hate her and write her a certificate of divorce, and put it in her hand, and send her out of his house, or when the latter husband dies, who took her to be his wife, then her former husband who sent her away is not allowed to take her back to be his wife after she has been defiled, for that would be an abomination before Yahweh. And do not bring sin on the house, and do not bring sin on the land which Yahweh your Elohim is giving you as an inheritance. When a man has taken a new wife, let him not go out into the army, nor let any matter be imposed upon him. He shall be exempt 1 year for the sake of his home, to rejoice with his wife whom he has taken. No one takes in pledge the lower or the upper millstone, for he would be taking a life in pledge. When a man is found kidnapping any of his brothers of the children of Israel, and treats him harshly or sells him, then the kidnapper shall die. Thus you shall purge the evil from your midst. Take heed in an outbreak of leprosy to diligently guard and do according to all that the priests, the Levites, teach you, as I have commanded them. So you shall guard to do. Remember that Yahweh your Elohim did to Miriam on the way when you came out of Mitzrayim, when you land your brother alone. Do not go into his house to get his pledge. Stand outside and let the man to whom you lend bring the pledge out to you. And if the man is poor, do not sleep with his pledge. By all the means return the pledge to him at sundown, and he shall sleep in his own garment, and shall bless you, and it shall be righteousness to you before Yahweh your Elohim. Do not oppress a hired servant who is poor and needy of your brothers, or of your strangers who are in your land, within your gates. Give him his wages on the same day, and do not let the sun go down on it, for he is poor and lifts up his being to it, so that he does not cry out against you to Yahweh, and it shall be sin in you. Fathers are not put to death for their children, and children are not put to death for their fathers. Each is to die for his own sin. Do not twist the right rulings of the stranger or the fatherless, nor take the garment of a widow. But you shall remember that you were a slave in Mitzrayim, and that Yahweh your Elohim ransomed you from there. Therefore I am commanding you today to this word. When you reap your harvest in your field and have forgotten a sheaf in the field, do not go back to it. Don't go back to get it. Let it be for the stranger, for the fatherless, and for the widow, so that Yahweh your Elohim might bless you in all the work of your hands. When you beat your olive trees, do not examine the branches behind you. Let it be for the stranger, for the fatherless, and for the widow. When you gather the grapes of your vineyard, do not glean behind you. Let it be for the stranger, for the fatherless, and for the widow. And you shall remember that you were a slave in the land of Mitzrayim. Therefore I'm commanding you to do this word. When there is a dispute between men, then they shall come into judgment, and they shall be judged, and the righteous declared righteous, and the wrongdoer declared wrong. And it shall be, if the wrongdoer is to be struck, that the judge shall cause him to lie down and be struck in his presence, with a number of blows according to his wrong. 40 strikes for 40 strikes he gives him, but no more, lest he strikes him with many more blows. Then these and your brother be degraded before your eyes. Do not muzzle an ox while it is threshing. Then when brothers dwell together and one of them has died and has no son, the widow of the dead man shall not become a stranger's outside. Her husband's brother does go in to her and shall take her as his wife and perform the duty of a husband's brother to her. And it shall be that the firstborn son which she bears does rise up for the name of his dead brother, so that his name is not blotted out of Israel. But if the man does not desire to take his brother's wife, then let his brother's wife go up to the gate to the elders and say, my husband's brother refuses to raise up a name to his brother in Israel. He does not agree to perform the duty of my husband's brother. The elders of the city shall then call him and speak to him, and he shall stand and say, I have no desire to take her. Then his brother's wife shall come to him in his presence of the elders, and remove his sandal from his foot, and shall spit in his face, and answer and say, thus it is done to the man who does not build up his brother's house. And in Israel his name shall be called the house of him who his sandal is removed. When men fight with one another, a man and his brother and the wife of one shall draw near to rescue her husband from the hand of the one who's striking him, and shall put out her hand and take hold of him by his genitals. Then you shall cut off her hand. Your eye does not harden. You shall not have in your bag different weights, a heavy and a light. You shall not have in your house differing measures, a large and a small. You shall have a perfect and right weight, a perfect and right measure, so that they prolong your days on the soil which Yahweh your Elohim is giving you. For all who do these and all who do unrighteously are an abomination to Yahweh your Elohim. Remember what Amalek did to you on the way as you were coming out of Mitzrayim, how he met you on the way and attacked your back, on the feeble ones in your rear, and when you were tired and weary, and he did not fear Elohim. Therefore, it shall be, when Yahweh your Elohim has given you rest from your enemies all around in the land which Yahweh your Elohim is giving you, possess as an inheritance, that you blot out the remembrance of Amalek from under the heavens, and do not forget. A lot of subjects there. All right. There's a few things that stuck out to me for sure. I know one of them is in verse 22 when it says, when a man has committed a sin worthy of death, then he shall be put to death, and you shall hang him from a tree. It talks about how he'll be cursed. Then Yeshua hung from a tree and was cursed, but he was cursed for us and our curse. That's one of them sticks out to me. Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, because a lot of the issues he was dealing with in his ministry, he was challenged with questions. And any questions? Anybody got anything they want to put out there? All right. We're going to have a whole photo book here. Yeah, that was one with horses and a mule, was a donkey, putting them side by side. I'm sure you have some insight for us.
Chapter 21, verse 18, about the rebellious son.
Uh-uh.
Is it a small enough community that everybody knows that he is a rebellious son
Oh, I'm sure, yeah.
and that he doesn't obey? Because how hard would it be for parents to say, here's my rebellious son, knowing that he's going to die because they're presenting him in that light?
Yeah.
I mean, it just seems,
I think part of it, too, is like everybody knows. So
Yeah.
if you're going to be the idiot of a son that's going to act like that, it's like, they probably don't even have a record of, sons being executed or something on their front door, their parents. But if you think about it, the prodigal son, he was kind of rebellious, but he left. He
Yeah.
did leave his father's house. He left the community and went
Yep.
probably to a foreigner city or something.
I just can't imagine a mother's heart
Yeah, it would be rough.
doing that.
Maybe that was in there enough to keep those children when they start acting up as a reminder. There's a you have to do to you if you keep on acting like that. Okay, I'll stop. The fear of the Lord in them, you know what I'm saying? That kind of thing. Yeah.
Well, and I think of like some of the things we know today about behavior and stuff like that. This is a way to prevent some of the poor learned behaviors too, which doesn't make it any easier to do, of course. But so I had a little tidbit that I thought was interesting. I didn't come up with it. It was on an Aleph Beta thing that I had watched this morning. In chapter 22, verses 6 and 7, when it talks about when you come upon a bird's nest along the way, or in a tree or on the ground with your young ones or eggs, with the mother sitting on the young or on the eggs, do not take the mother with the young. Let the mother go without fail, and take the young for yourself, so that it might be well with you, and that you shall prolong your days. And I thought that was really interesting, because he connected it back to honoring your father and mother. That is the only other command with a promise, that it will be well with you and shall prolong your days. And then he was also talking about why that was important, and there were two schools of thought. One being that it's cruel to take the babies from the mother in the mother's view, or having the mother watch losing their young, and looking at humans and how difficult that is for humans to watch their children die or be taken away from them. And then the other school of thought was that it is defiling motherhood in a way, because what a vulnerable place it is for the mother bird when she's watching over her young. So to take both the mother and the babies at the same time, that is the one time. It was funny, he played the Benny Hill theme song, and he said, why don't you go pause the video, go outside and try and catch me an adult bird. And then it paused the Benny Hill song, and you see the little character running around trying to catch a physical bird. And that's really hard to do. However, when they're resting on their nest, that it makes them an easy target. And the mother would lay down her life for her child. So by taking the mother and the eggs, there's those two pieces. So I thought that was just kind of interesting, and I like the parallel to honoring your father and mother. So
Yeah, and if you think about it too, you just look at where we are in this country. If you there was a time where you go out on the plains in the Midwest and stuff, there were buffalo, millions of them, elk, deer. I mean, and they were just herds that aren't there anymore. And then you go and you wipe out the mother and the babies, the future and the present of that species. At some point, that bird won't exist, or at least won't be in your area, you know. And so, I mean, you can just look at it just with what we've done. I mean, we probably don't have species of fish, and just, you know, how they have to curve a lot, like whether it's the shrimping and hunting seasons and different seasons, and try to keep that particular species in existence. If we were just going and wiping everything out, you know, it wouldn't be there later. So, shouldn't eat chicken and eggs in the same day, or just not the same bunch, yeah. But yeah, I mean, that's just really.
I think also it's showing that the Father, Elohim, he cares for the least of things, you know? And then, of course, his image, which are us, you know? But even the animals he created, you know, he just, like, hey, all my creation means something to me, so don't, like you said, be selfish about it, and don't, you have to understand that, you know, the thing I've had him there for, it needs to continue, you know? And just because you're my people, the apple of my eye, you still need to respect them too, because they're my creation, yeah.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of the don't boil the kid in the mother's milk, kind of the same concept of, you know, keep the two separate, you know, allow for the future to progress, and, you know, the same thing like she was saying with, like, almost like the cruelty on either side, like, let them live in nature as they're supposed to. If there was no interference, how would they get by just fine? So make sure they can continue to get by just fine when you are not interfering. But back to the beginning with the female captive, I thought it was interesting, like verse 10 through 14-ish, how when you capture her, it's still like a redemption plan. So it says, you know, and I think there's a little bit of health concern just based on like some of history that we know, but having her shave her head, change her clothes, and clip her nails, that's where you would hold a lot of dirt, lice, like the pilgrims, how we gave them the blankets with the smallpox and stuff like that. You carry a lot of filth and stuff in your hair, your nails, and your clothes. So it seems like there's a little bit of like health concern of it's not so much of like, oh, let's make her embarrassed and make her bald, you know, because he says, I forgot what verse, but your hair is your beauty. So why would you go and then say, well, cut your hair off? You know, there's no vow or anything being done. So I think that's more of the reason behind it. But then it also gives her like that 30 days. So it's like, well, here's your health concern, and here's your mental health concern. Because, yeah, you just lost everything you've ever known. And now we're supposed to be conformed in his image. So it also gives her that time to kind of adjust to what's going on. This is a new place, new people, new culture, new rules. And here's 30 days to kind of watch and learn. And I think that's a really good example of not just, hey, you don't do what we do, bash you in the head, and you need to change overnight. You know, like, even in this scenario where she's now married to the guy, he's like, don't mess with her for 30 days, no bedroom time or anything to like let that fully process of what just happened, where you came from, where you are, you get yourself cleaned up and all that. So I enjoy that there's God showing his love through all of that. He's like, even in war and, the spoils of war, he's like, there's still a path of redemption and a future for these females, because normally they would get, like they said, don't sell them, don't trade them. Normally they're just a commodity. He's like, no, this is a creature to be loved, and give her that opportunity to fit in. And then kind of what Chris was talking about with the man hanged on a tree. It says, it's just, I love that section so much because I've used it so many times as a reference, like, oh, this is just New Testament stuff. It's like, well, what's this about then? And how does this connection keep coming back? So it says, don't let him even stay in there overnight. And, so we say, okay, well, Jesus took the curse of the law, so that what leaves the blessing. So there's still a blessing there, but the curse, we're no longer, we die every time we mess up. But he's like, while he was on the cross, don't leave him up there overnight. So we know that came true. And then it also says, so you shall not defile your land that the Lord your God has given you for an inheritance. So all of Yeshua's story was in Israel for the most part. That's still the land. So everything's still just coming full circle. And if he didn't fulfill this prophecy in the way that it spells out, they may have lost that. And so even though the Romans had no idea what's going on, and the Jews at the time had somewhat of an idea of what was going on, maybe just the wrong lens, they still followed through whether they wanted to or not. And God still used the whole scenario to ultimately fulfill his prophecy all the way back here in Deuteronomy.
I think also with the humbling of the woman, I think it's to give the guy time to think about what he's doing too. Because, with a lot of different probably nations or tribes outside of Israel, they would go in and they would ransack a city or a village or whatever, and they'd rape the women and pillage and all that. And God does not allow that. He didn't say, hey, go ahead and have your way with them. If you decide you don't like them, just kick them to the curb. He's like, no, you're going to go through this process. And then once you've calmed down, cooled down, and once she's had time to realize what's going on, then, you can come together. And so I think, too, it's kind of get the guy's head cleared, too. And so it's not just going to be like she's not an object. She's one of God's creations. She's a human being, and there's some dignity she's being treated with there, even though, her hair is shaved and stuff. And also it's getting away from her old identity, and now you're coming into a new identity, kind of like crossing over, and then also she's got that time to think, is that what I want to do?
Well, also, if you think about it, so this time period, I mean, they're probably not in silence, and he's going about his time during that, isn't it, for a month?
Yeah.
Okay, so he's being a witness to her about who he serves, okay? So when she does become his wife, she may say, hey, I want to follow your God. She's evidently of another type of God stuff going on, right? And then the vanity thing, I think that's with the shaving the head and the fingernail cutting, probably sanitary also, in some cases. But it shows that the guy will marry her. It's not based on looks. Like where the other cultures, they're all got the makeup and it's all got to be that kind of thing going on to attract a man. Whereas this is letting her know that, I'm sure he sits down with her and asks her, do you want to still continue here and be my wife? And she's probably thinking, man, I look all yucky. Like compared to what I used to look, all flashy and stuff in the other time, the other places you live. So it's like humbling to know that that guy is going to marry her because he loves her, not because of what she looks like or what she can give him. That Jezebel thing going on probably like in the other cultures. And then also there's another follower. Just like us, how we're bringing, they're light. They're trying to be light to the world, I thought that's pretty cool in that too.
I was actually going to skip this section, but y'all brought it up. So I got like 15 questions from this Torah portion, but so this section, Deuteronomy 21, 10 through 13, 10 through 14, or whatever, reading through it, you almost have to assume that the woman wants to go along with it, because it doesn't really, the wording doesn't really leave room for what she wants, it seems like. So I did have the question of, is this command leaving room for what the woman wants? And so is this okay even if it's against her will or desire? Now, I would hope that through the time of seeing how this man is and who the God he follows and all that stuff, that she would maybe would have a change of heart to see that, okay, he's not some barbarian type person and I'll be treated well. And so, going along that line of thought, if it's not of her will and it is against her desire, at what point would it be wrong? And then the consummation would be rape and not, marriage. So,
Okay. Well, like if you're thinking about the thing that we like talked about, I don't know if it's before that or what, but talking about rape. Remember, like if you go to it might be in
It's coming
23.
up, yeah.
Well, like somebody, if they go in the field and they see a maiden, they humble her, they have to marry her. Well, that's got to do with the people in Israel. These are the laws for them. Okay. So when they go out, it says in verse 10, when you go out of the camp to go fight against your enemies, and Yahweh your Elohim shall give them into your hand, and you shall take them captive. See, their enemies. This is not somebody in the camp like the commands for them pertain to. So the thing is too is it's not she doesn't have a say so, but she don't understand that this is actually a good thing for her, because these other cultures, if she was by herself, like the place was burned down, they would treat her miserably, like a object, versus this man taking her as captive. It sounds harsh when it says it like that, captive, but he's actually going to help her if she will allow him to do that. He will, and he's at all this criteria, because he's under God's law. Treat her these things that is saying, you can't touch her and mess with her. She does have to shave her head, cut her nails, for whatever reason, and you're going to love her through this. Then you're going to ask her after 30 days. Then that's the part where she's got a choice. Then you're going to ask her after the 30 days, do you want to still continue here and be my wife, or do I let you go? That, because he does have to ask her that. She has the choice to either stay or go. So that's right there is like showing that right there. I think it's verse 14.
And I think too, as we go through these, we can't examine them through
Which part?
our
Wait, let
own
me
culture and our own eyes,
Hold on a second.
because she's captured. She understands. Now she understands she could be sold to people who are going to rape her and beat her. She doesn't know Yahweh's laws. So we're in a whole different culture. Her culture does the same thing to some other tribe, and they drug women back. And in fact, a lot of them maybe raped and murdered the women right there in that village before they even had a chance.
Yeah, see in verse 13, it talks about, okay, and put aside the mantle of her captivity, and she shall dwell in your house and mourn her father and her mother a month of days. And after that, you shall go into her and be her husband, and she shall be your wife. Okay, now he is still going forth and doing. There's not a choice on her part yet. And it shall be, if you are not pleased with her, then you shall let her go at her desire. Yeah, but then it says at her desire also. So it doesn't say you then you shall let her go. It says you shall let her go at her desire.
Believe me,
But you do not sell her at all for silver. Do not treat her harshly, since you have humbled her. So, like, if you have a confrontation with her, just say you're like, I don't want to be with you. And she's like, what? You don't want to be with me? But, okay, I don't want to be with you anyway. Well, you can't, like, be all mad at her and then say, hey, I'm going to sell you because you acted mean to me. You know what I'm saying? You just got to let her go. You'll have to just part ways, and that's it.
And you got to look at it too. And this is who the Father's speaking to. He's speaking to a Israelite that's got a circumcised heart, has compassion and love for humanity, that loves the Father and wants to do right by Yahweh. And so when he comes to this woman and she's had her 30 days, her hair's growing back, her nails are growing back and all this other stuff, and you might even still be attracted to her, but she's like, my God is Baal. I'm
Yeah.
gonna serve Astaroth and all this other stuff. And she's fighting and arguing. You killed my mom, my dad.
Yeah.
She's obviously not someone you want to be married to.
And here's the thing: these are laws told to men in that camp, Israel camp, before this happens. So this is not like they do this thing and then okay, here's your laws about how to do that, and they're like, what? They have to understand this. If they go to that war and they bring back a lady, this is the procedure they have to do. So if you don't want to get involved in this kind of thing, don't even bring nobody back. So
Yeah, it's kind of a deterrent too.
When I read it, I am assuming that the person is going to do the right thing and show the love because he has the other commands of love God and then love your neighbor as yourself. And so this command gets paired with all the other commands about love.
Sure.
And so I'm assuming that the person knows to do the right thing, but just in the wording of the command, it doesn't really leave. It kind of leaves that part out about what does she want and these things like that. So I just had some questions, but yeah, let's hope the men were doing the right thing.
well, here's the thing: they're accountable in other areas. The Israel men, not just in that one area. So like if they're beating up a woman and stuff, even if it's whoever their wife is, you don't think the other people are going to be saying something?
Right.
And especially when it gets back to Moses and Aaron, all them,
Well,
they're going to be like, "Hey, you're going to get stoned to death if you keep on acting like some." Because I think there's a verse about that, like if you harm a woman or there's other stuff. So the father's
Right.
not making this rule to the women don't know it, but it's a love thing, and he knows what he's doing when he made this command to the Israelites when they get people.
And you got to think
Yeah.
about it too.
Yeah.
I mean, here's a guy. He's like, okay, I know the rules of our community, and I'm gonna marry this woman. She's gonna be my wife, and we're gonna have children. She's gonna take part of raising my children.
She's gonna be in this
Yeah.
camp with all the
So
other
there's-
people, my
there's a lot,
brothers,
you know,
Israel brothers.
there's a lot that,
Yeah.
that a person
Yeah.
should be thinking about. Israelite man should be thinking about instead of it's just his
Personal selfish
his own
desires.
pleasures. Yeah. But I think the 30 days is there also because these guys are like, they're all jacked up from war and adrenaline's going. There's a beautiful
Right.
young
Right.
virgin maiden over there, and now they got to go through this 30-day criteria before they just take her for a wife.
They can control themselves too.
And so by then, maybe
Yeah.
like I said, maybe they've calmed down a little bit, and that's just how I see it.
It's got to be that because that's what the father is. He went and put that woman in a dangerous situation
Yeah.
with that guy.
When I was reading that and I had those questions, I was somewhat coming from the perspective of maybe someone who's from outside and would have questions like, okay, well, why does your God allow this? But then kind of answered my own question in a way, but it also y'all made great points. And you got to combine this with all the other stuff. You can't just take this on as a standalone. Be like, look what he said about when you take a woman. So,
Yeah.
next one for Deuteronomy 21 is 15 through 17. And it's Deuteronomy 21, 15 through 17. But it's specifically this part that speaks about, but he shall acknowledge the firstborn. And the part by giving him a double portion of all that he has, right? So I got 2 boys. So I'm trying to figure out, just like we're in the seat, we're in the dietary laws, keeping Sabbath, keeping feast, giving a double portion to Asen, is that something that I'm supposed to be upholding to? Or is this one of those things that doesn't necessarily apply?
I would think it would apply. Now, do you have a double portion to give him? I mean, what is a double portion?
Yeah. I always view it
Yeah.
as I give him double what I give Eli.
Well, I mean, if you look at Jacob and Esau, there was a blessing. There's two different types of blessings. And then I think this is written here because of Jacob and his 2 wives,
Mm-hmm.
and the way he treated them, and how his sons kind of felt slighted, his firstborn
Yeah.
Reuben.
Oh, yeah, they were
Well,
vocal about it, too.
And at the time too, there's probably already guys in the camp that got 2 wives.
Yeah.
And so he can't just say, "Hey, just divorce one of them." But yeah, I think it applies.
I would think
Whatever
so.
you understand to be a double portion.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, right.
You had
With
double
Asen,
eggs.
double the food, always.
But also, but
I know.
but the firstborn also comes with a responsibility
Yeah.
to take over the family, and take
Mhm.
over whatever family business, if it's a farm or whatever it might be. And we don't really live like that kind of culture now, but still, I think there are ways that it still applies to
Mhm.
us with our firstborn sons.
Right.
And even if it's a firstborn daughter, perhaps. Yeah, it depends on if you got boys or girls.
Yeah, I know I've been leaning that way, but I wanted to bring the question up. 'Cause,
And this is even if, let's say, your oldest son kind of irritates you, you don't like him, you like your youngest better, oldest still gets double portion.
So I feel like you may have answered the question that I'm just gonna mumble out. So, and when I ask this, I understand that polygamy is wrong, so I'm just gonna put that out there. But I can see why people might consider this confusing, also be considering Jacob and his whole situation. But is it safe to assume that this 15 through 17 is applicable to those who have come out of Egypt and already had two wives? Not saying that it is okay to have two wives and you should have two wives or multiple wives, but for those of you who do have two wives already, these are the statutes and the parameters and how you should kind of go about it with your kids. Is that safe to
Yeah.
say?
It's fair.
Yeah. You think so?
Dead space.
Well, I think too, by the time Yeshua comes around, Yeshua's just like, just take one wife. But I think
Make it easy for yourself.
Yeah, no drama.
Right.
oh yeah.
Okay. All right. Cool. So yes. Okay. So
So yes, you think it's okay to have two wives.
no.
okay.
It's time to take out
Let's clear this up.
Alan's like, I got
Gloves.
enough.
Uh,
That's enough. I don't know how
so
he did it. Back
we also have to remember that there was also laws in place for people who did also have wives that they're not to be in the same household, So I think that it kind of still applies as well for that. So he's like, yes, ground rules for this kind of situation. Yeah, because really, I don't believe in the whole, having multiple wives thing. But, really, Scripture had specified the priest are not to have more than one wife.
But what happens in a case where you have a wife and your brother dies, and now you got to take on at least to have a child?
Uh-huh.
So
Yeah.
I mean, it's a lot of this is within the community of Israel, and they're all living in close quarters, and
But
things are a little different.
that Scripture does say, though, that the woman is to, if her husband dies and she does not have a male son with
Yeah.
him, she's to go to
The brother.
the brother.
has been redeemed.
Yeah.
And I think that's primarily just to have a child too. I mean, even though there's still, it says to get married.
Get married.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit of a funny, like, I know we go back like culturally and all that, but the verses that do say be a husband of only one wife does apply to elders and church leaders, where it's specific. Everywhere else in Scripture, there's no direct admonition against it. There's warnings against it and what to do if you decide to go that route. Same thing like strong drink. There's nowhere it says you shouldn't do it. It just says be careful when you do. And there's a lot more rules and expectations for a person who indulges. So I know it goes completely counter to our culture today, and we also don't live in a world that even really makes a lot of sense. But scripture-wise, there's no time it says not to do it. If anything, there's way more scriptures that say to when you do it, not if you do it. And then, like you said, if your husband dies, then this. If you meet this person, then that. So there's all these laws built in to tell you if and when you decide to do it, you have these new rules that apply. But there's no issue because a woman can only be under one umbrella, but a man can umbrella multiple women. But you'd have to, the way the rules are all set out, you have to be able to provide for them fully, take them as a full-blown wife. You can't say, well, you get the leftovers and you get the good stuff or whatever. So it's if you have the ability to maintain and sustain 2 full-blown women, then there's no rule against it. Just a bunch of new warnings of
Yep.
hey, treat them equally, do this, don't do that. And like the verse we're reading here, if your oldest kid is over here, but you don't like her no more, and you want to treat this oldest kid better, like it doesn't count. It's still the oldest.
Right.
So, yeah, it's not our happy America truth, but it's definitely nowhere it says don't do it unless you're a church elder. And I think that's for purpose of you're a leader and trying to be an example. And if you're like Paul says, it's better to be not married because you could focus on the mission more. Well, if you've got one wife, he's like, you already pulled off 50% of your time. You got 2 wives. How you can be a preacher now? You're too busy
Yeah.
taking care of your house.
And you know when Paul is saying that about like the elders and stuff like that, I think he's referring to the Torah because he knows the Torah back and forth. He upholds the Torah, and I think a lot of people think that that means something else. It's great that nobody gets divorced these days, but somebody chooses to flee and get divorced. Like if you're trying to stay and they're going, what can you do? So it's like I think he's talking about this thing when he's talking about the fivefold ministries and all that stuff, to be with one woman. Because I think people in these other cultures were marrying, like having a bunch of women in their life, like the polygamy thing.
I think, well, you look at also the story of Samuel, his mother. She was married to a man who had another wife that was having a bunch of children, and she wasn't having children, and then she committed Samuel to the father if he would get her pregnant. Anyway, stories are there.
Oh yeah, and all that fighting and stuff. And then you got also Abraham too. I mean, even though he had Sarah, but he did that thing with the. Now we have to live with the descendants. Well, they're good. They're starting to get saved.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
I know the story. Please believe me. I know the
Yeah.
beginning from the end. Just trust me on this.
Don't do it.
So back to that, the very first little passage, 21 verse 10 through 14. There are a couple of really fundamental principles illustrated here that are not necessarily obvious. And I give credit to Tom Bradford for pointing this out when we were looking at it earlier today. One thing is, so this talks about where the Father has directed the nation to go out and conquer another people, who are occupying the land, clearing them out in order to make way for his people to take up residence there, and what to do in those cases. In many of them, the command is kill everything: man, woman, child, animal. Don't even take the spoil. Leave it. But in this is a different case, and it kind of goes back to what happened when Jacob's family went. Well, even before Jacob's family went into Israel. What happened when Jacob and his family came out of Mesopotamia and settled near Shechem, and that terrible incident occurred that led to the slaughter of all the men of Shechem, and the women and children were taken captive. What happened to those women and children? And we're not really told explicitly what happened, but they were incorporated into Jacob's family. They may have, the women may have become wives to Jacob's sons. We don't really know exactly what happened there, but we know that they were not killed, they were not disposed of, they were incorporated into the family. So even before they went into Egypt, that happened. Then in Egypt, the nation grew exponentially, and part of that was through intermarriage with the non-Israelites that were in Egypt. Not necessarily all Egyptians. They could have been from other cultures because a lot of different nationalities lived there. But the point of all that was to illustrate that the father is interested a lot less in ethnicity than he is about spirituality. So, ethnic purity is really not a concern to him, but spiritual purity is. So when these people are incorporated into his family, assuming they take on the mantle of believing in him as the, as the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, as the creator of all things, as the giver of all good things, as the disciplinarian when you disobey, all of those things, it's an opportunity for those who are outside of the ethnic circle to become part of the spiritual circle. And that's illustrated right here when you take a woman prisoner and want to make her your wife. And then there's all the things that we've talked about. Well, what happens if she's not interested? She's going to make that obvious to him, and if he's wise,
Smart, yeah.
he'll take that into account and not force himself on her. But if she's willing, and during that 30 days, she gets to see what Shabbat looks like. She gets to see what life in the Commonwealth, in the community looks like, and decide whether she wants to be a part of that or not. And if she does, then she is essentially saying, I will become part of this community. I will place my faith in the one who established it, and she'll be just as one of the people that were ethnically Hebrew. And we can look at the example of Ruth as another case of that. Now, that was not a case where she was taken captive, but she was a Moabite, and yet she came into the family. She placed her allegiance in him, and was it a reward to become the great-grandmother or grandmother of great-grandmother of King David?
Yes.
Who knows? So that was one thing that I thought was really important here. And the whole 30-day thing, where she's given an opportunity to mourn for her father and mother, she's able to kind of put aside her past and be able to start a new life. And that, we have an example of that see in Mark 10:29, where it talks about starting really in verse 28, where Kepha says, began saying to him, "Look, we have left everything and followed you." And Yeshua said, "Yes, I tell you that there is no one who has left house, brothers, sisters, mother, father, children, or fields for my sake and for the sake of the good news who will not receive 100 times over now in the Olam Hazeh, which is the time we live in, homes, brothers, sisters, mothers, children, and lands with persecutions. Persecutions come along with the blessing, and in the Olam Haba, in the future time, eternal life. So I guess the connection is, in both cases, in order to become part of God's family, you have to set something aside. You have to put aside your own brothers and sisters. And, and it talks about elsewhere, when a man and woman come together in marriage, they are to leave and cleave.
Mhm.
So they're leaving their family of origin, creating a new family, starting with just them. So a couple of key points from that.
Tying that
That
into,
section.
since you brought that up about Ruth, there's Rahab also.
Yeah.
She wasn't an Israelite. She was
Right.
let's just call her Gentile.
Yeah.
Gentile, Ruth, Gentile.
Exactly.
They're all in this lineage of Messiah.
Sure.
And it was a blessing, because if you think about what Kepha in that verse you're talking about, you're going to be blessed. You leave all this stuff. You're pretty much laying down your life to serve the Father, and then of course Messiah in the future, and then also it. See, when it says lay down, isn't there a part that you read out of the gospel a minute ago about the lay down up in whoever lays down in their life? Okay, Ruth even says that to her mother-in-law. I'm not leaving. Like, I'm pretty much giving my life. I want to serve, God who you serve and that kind of thing. She got Gentile, Gentile, and then you got the Israelites. So you can see that coming together even in the Torah right here, like with the lady, shaved head lady, and then other people, like it could have been other people married before they came into the land, because there was old people, I'm sure, that were married and stuff. They, got multiple wives, like, and so the father's kind of making, not trying to say that it's a good thing to do that, but he's trying to let them understand that they have mercy, and he's going to make a way for them to start serving him. I really believe that's what it's all about, the relationship part of this, not just laws. You do this, you get your hand chopped off. It's like that's what the other gods were doing. And he's trying to separate himself from these other gods around that camp, make him be known as a loving God, not a hateful God and a mean God and all this. That punishes like these other devil gods, That's good stuff right there.
Just quick on what Ted's point, it is interesting. You always hear like, we're supposed to be a light on a hill. We're supposed to maintain the oracles, take care of the sojourners. There's all that language built in throughout all of Torah, where at no time it says, well, these are my people, the end. It's like, these are my people who will get the blessings, who get the laws in order to live a certain way to draw the world in. So the purpose for them even being set apart, ethnically, was so he could just, hey, this group here is going to live this way for this reason, and the whole purpose is that the world can get to know the true God. So that's why you see all the interjections of people coming in through the lineage, is because it was never about how Hebrew can we keep this, or
Yeah.
how Jewish can we keep this. It was like, well, while we need to maintain these rules and not start going crazy all over the place, don't marry those guys. It's going to mess you up.
Right.
But it's not because we
Or
don't
they're
love
good.
them. If they want to join, all good. But don't just go out there and find them and do it for fun. But moving on to 21 or 22, excuse me. I super love this top portion, 1 through 4. Just because it shows that that brotherly love, but it also, it says, let's not be so inwardly focused that we can't take care of someone else. And how often do we, we're walking down the street, or we're doing something, and we see something kind of foul, like, hey, the church lights are on. I should call somebody. Or, hey,
Yeah.
the door's open. Let's go lock it. We should have that mentality of almost putting people before ourselves. Same thing if we see, one of our kids running around, they got a scraped knee, we shouldn't be like, that's not my kid. Hey, if we got a Band-Aid, let's go take care of it. Or whatever the scenario is. And, I know it talks about oxes and stuff, and obviously we don't live around that. But even though it's saying, like, take care of that neighbor, it's like, go as far as to bring them into your own dwelling, bring them into your field, bring them into your house until you can get things restored back. Because we will all have a need, and we will all help in a need. And we never know what side of that equation we're on. One day we may be the one helping. The next day, our car's on the side of the road, and we're just flagging people down. Like, come on, guys, I just need to jump, And like, that's their problem. They got insurance. You know what I mean? And it's one of those really easy ways to pour into somebody and to show the Father's love, because we're supposed to, the greatest 2 commandments, love God, which teaches us what to do, and then go love people, the actual doing it part. And here it's saying this is one small way you can do that and maintain community. And then the last thing before I jump off, this whole section has a lot of what Ryan was asking about with the different abominations. And I love that they just started listing them off in here. There's like, I think there's 2 or 3 of them. So they're definitely scripture based, and they're written in a way that, like, God's not like, well, just for this time, maybe for a little bit or whatever. He's like, abomination, abomination, abomination. Don't do this, don't do this. He's like, there's bad, and then there's like, for real, don't do it. And
Yeah.
these are like those where, like, if you go this far, you're getting to that point where you're hardening your heart, and I'm probably not going to deal with you in the same way. Your consequences will get real fast. So this first one, 5, make sure we wear the right clothes and look the way we're supposed to look for everybody online.
And the version I was reading of the same thing that he just brought up, it says countrymen. I was really wondering if it was talking about brothers or if it was it trying to say literally anybody. But when I looked it up in Hebrew, it means brothers.
Well, they're all living in the same community. They're all
Mm-hmm.
part of Israel, of the tribes, or at least they've come into the community. So
Mhm.
it's not like where we are here, where not that you shouldn't apply
Super
it
mixed.
here, but there's a variety of
Yeah.
beliefs and understandings.
Right. But at first though, I was thinking that God was meaning this to apply to literally every single person you live around. But it does say brothers, so maybe it is specific to people of the faith or whatever.
I think that does change in the New Testament.
Well, yeah, because the thing in the New Testament is he's all this stuff right here is kind of lived out through Yeshua when he comes, and he's actually making it more like not only do you love your brothers, but you love your enemies. You see, so that's what the ultimate goal is the world. But right here, they gotta learn small steps because they're coming out of. He's trying to teach them how to live among just their people, these people in this little community. And then Yeshua is going to be telling them how to live with the world. That's what he says, go out to the world and preach my gospel. You got to love your enemies. And I know it says that you hate whatever, but no, you love everyone. You bless them also. So that curse you. So it's like a manifestation of all these right here. And then of course we're not under the curse no more of the Torah, because he took that curse. Now we are under consequences of our actions while we're here on earth if we do these things, at least the abomination ones and the ones that go against God, because those that are really, because they're the neighbor ones and then there's the God ones, which they all go together, because of 10 commandments. You start messing up with God, then you're usually messing up with your neighbor because you don't care, I guess. So.
So when Jonathan was talking about like being good to the sojourner, this came to me. Do not neglect the hospitality to strangers, for by this some have entertained angels without knowing it, like Rahab.
Yeah, that's right.
So yeah, that's pretty much all I want to really say. It's 'cause that came to mind, because even back then there would be angels coming up to them and they wouldn't know it. So it's kind of like a test at the same time. That's really it.
Yeah, because I believe that. I believe spiritual warfare was going on way back. I mean, it started in the garden, that warfare. Yeah. So, well, yeah, up in heaven. But I'm saying on earth, it was in the garden. So all this has been going on for a long time. Yeah.
So I was reading a book. I don't know. I think it was by Rebecca Brown, and what you were saying about how, yeah, when we sin, we're forgiven from our sins, but God's still going to allow us to deal with the consequences for sinning and going against Him. So people think they just because, oh well, it doesn't matter, I'm forgiven, and then they'll be like, oh, I don't understand why I'm going through this. Well,
Right.
yeah, your Father's still going to let you. You still have to deal with the consequences of what you did. Like, you still have to get your punishment, you still have to get your spanking or whatever, and depending on how bad it is how bad your spanking's going to be. So
Right.
that's why we try not to sin as hard.
Yeah. Or, if
Or
you
at
get
all.
your spanking, just let him spank, go with it.
Let him spank you and get it
and
over
actually,
with.
he's going to walk it through with you. And then he's going to be merciful. Because you hear that thing, too. If somebody does truly repent, turn
Mhm.
away, but they do get their consequences. Whereas if they go murder somebody, they might not get life in prison. They might get out in 50 years. You know what I'm saying? So that's mercy for him, that's saying, okay, now you can go do my work, what you're supposed to do, instead of being a
Kind
heathen.
of like David when he took the census.
Yeah, right.
Like, and me and Don were talking about this the other night about how God gave him a choice. It's like, look, I'm going to give you the 3 punishments, but you choose which one.
Yeah.
And me and Don were talking the other night, and we're like, but the one we noticed is, like, none of them touched David. Instead, he allowed the 72,000 of his people to die, but he's like, no, man, don't touch me. Take care of them instead. And we were just talking about that. Like, God gave him the options of what punishment You know, it's like us. You know, you either take a spanking or you go outside. I'd rather take a spanking so I can go outside.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think one thing too that it's easy to confuse when we're reading through the Torah and then the New Testament is and where we live. So a lot of the Torah is community driven. It's like your neighbor is a Israelite, right? So so yeah, you're gonna look at your neighbor and make sure, you know, he's not acting certain ways and different things like that, and you're not gonna try and stone his, you know, tell him he needs to stone his kid for drinking and all that, you know, where. You know, they were more, how would you put it? I don't want to say it takes a village, but they were more in each other's business because your neighbor actually would reflect on you and your community and how maybe God would come down on your community. And then I'm not saying it doesn't apply in the nations as well, but for us in a mixed community like this, and we're not in Israel, is yes, your neighbor is going to be judged by God, but they're not necessarily under the same requirements that are for the believer. Does that make sense? And so, you know, even though a lot of times, even with what your neighbor does is going to reflect or affect your life, but they're really not under the same requirements like as in the Old Testament, well not the Old, but the Torah and in Israel. God punished them as a community a lot of times, not just individually, and that's why individually they had to drag that person out and go, you either can't stay in the camp or we have to deal with you this way. Or in our community, we can't necessarily do that because they don't follow the same rules. They don't even know the rules. And so even though we, in our own community, we have our own set of rules, our own government, but I think sometimes that's where we, hopefully I've done a good job of explaining it, but that's where we sometimes can blur the lines and confuse it. And we can't have these expectations for our neighbors necessarily.
Well, that's another thing too. I think since they lived together this many years, they probably hung out together. They probably worshiped. You know, I'm sure the father taught them about worshiping and praising his name with songs, and we got these songs, you know. So they got to know each other, and they actually tried with all these guidelines that the father's telling them to do, kind of like respect each other. Y'all respect each other. So on that, saying that, because like they went to go discipline somebody's kid, and they told why they were doing that, that parent wouldn't go up against them. Whereas nowadays, a parent would be like, you talk to my son like that, only I can say that, you know. But they're going to say, no, the camp, they know what the camp runs by because the father is saying it. That number one, you know, creator is saying this is how you live by this, and this is what the standard is in the camp. You know? So like if you got somebody, so you know the part about the stoning of that kid, well, somebody might have tried to help that kid before he got to that level of being stoned and said, hey, parents, this kid is acting crazy, and you might want to nip it in the butt before it gets out of hand. And then that's when they start working on the kid, saying, listen, these are the bare facts. If you don't start listening, you could be stoned. That's probably why it never happened. Because don't you think there were probably rebellious little teenagers back then, or preteens? You know, just the hormone thing going crazy, you know? But so I think that's what another thing, too, is everybody trusted each other, and were, like, really close. You know, they hung out with each other when they had their free time besides working or whatever. But they developed that relationship so they can kind of hinder some of this stuff going on. It's probably very rare if some of this happened because there was dire consequences. If you, like the one about getting your hand, like the lady with if husbands are fighting and she goes and tries to hurt the other husband, grabbing him and stuff, cuts her arm off, you know? Who knows if that ever happened? It might not never happen because she knew that. Like, a woman knew that. Hey, if they fight, hey, let them have it. I ain't getting involved. You know, I'll pray and that's it. So, I don't want my hand cut off. So we have to understand these people, you know, the father knows they got brains in their head to kind of think about this stuff. And these were laid out before. Like, he's not a bad father. He tells them ahead of time, this is what happens if you do this stuff. So, like, they didn't know. So.
Some of the other parts I have from 22. A woman shall not wear a man's clothing. And this one came from MTOI's Torah study. And question came up about uniforms and things like that. I don't know, I thought it was an interesting question. I personally don't think like I'd say like it's jeans or it's like khakis and then like a collared T-shirt. I would be typically viewed as like something that a man would wear. But if a female had to wear that for a uniform for work, probably not breaking the command. They were mostly putting it on, are you choosing to wear man's clothing as a woman, or are you choosing to wear men's clothing as a woman? So if you have to wear a uniform that would have you in men's clothing, that you're not in violation of this command. So I'm just bringing that up. Not really a question.
Well, here's the thing. Okay, so back then they probably wore I'm assuming because I always see it in movies and stuff how they dress for that time period. They got the long thing, the men and the women. Now the woman sometimes has an extra one, and that's because we have this upper part we have to deal with that covers, and it has maybe side ties or something, or maybe have a belt on. So to me it goes with what Yeshua said about what's in the heart comes out. So I'm thinking if you want because I'm sure there was this homosexuality or whatever didn't start this day and age. It happened back then. And this, the demon, the devil's getting in there with their mind, thinking that they're women and stuff. It just didn't start now. So they were wanting to be dressed like a woman. Maybe wear the dangly earrings and all that stuff. So I'm thinking that's what it's saying, not really necessary. Like for instance, in Israel, they have the girls and boys that go to war. They can't fight in a dress. And then the guys.
Yeah, they could.
A kilt.
So what I'm saying is it's appropriate for what they're doing, Like when you look at those women, they look like women. If you look at their pictures, all the ones I've seen, they look like women, even though they have the uniform on.
It's all tucked up, and you see them from behind.
Right. So I think this is what it's saying is if you're trying to act like a man with your dress or act like a woman with your dress, we know what that looks like nowadays. So that. Back then, especially in those pagan countries, and Sodom and Gomorrah, they probably acting like that too. So that's where that is. It's not just about just pants, and it's just not about,
I think it's always a deeper issue than the actual clothes.
yeah.
Because you look at there are men, they might still be wearing men's clothes, but they act feminine. Maybe some of them can't help it, but for the most part, some of them are intentionally acting feminine, and then
Right.
you have
Yeah.
women act
There you go.
masculine. And, and a lot of the clothing, like Angela said back then, were very similar, but you knew the difference because a woman was.
And then she
dressed
had her
a little
hair
more feminine,
long, and then the
a
men had their
man
hair shorter or whatever.
was feminine,
Um,
except for Samson.
My other one was the vineyard and mixing seeds. Come on, phone. That's 22:9. So
He was trying to steal your thunder, Jonathan.
So I think, kind of going back to that a little bit, I know we have the issue of like breaking the natural order of things and, the way God designed it. So obviously that's like first and foremost. And then, like you said, I think the clothing is the outward expression of what the inward issue is. But I think it's funny because we always, and a lot of the questions that we have during Torah studies are trying to equate what's going on in that time period and then apply it to today. And I think when we try to apply it today, we say, well, today is the world we live in, so let's make it fit today. I think my opinion, a major issue is we're trying to make today the standard and then slap that on today versus that's the standard and how do we make today look like that? Because in today's world, we see, like Ryan was saying, military work uniforms and stuff like that. That didn't exist then. There was no woman working at a kiosk at Verizon wearing a red shirt and khaki pants. There was no such thing.
Right.
It didn't ever exist. So there would have been no opportunity for a woman to be wearing a man's clothes because they were doing two separate roles in two separate places for two separate reasons.
Yeah.
So when we look today, we're like, well, we're all in this bubble together now. Like, being in the military, we all wore the same thing every day. But
There you go.
there was different standards. They had to have this and I had to have that. There's some differences where you should be able to tell, but sometimes you don't. And you look back in history, all the men were the ones who were fighting. Like in the verses we read earlier, after a man gets married, he's got to stay home for a year. So it doesn't say after a woman gets married, she can't go to war for a year. She just wasn't going because it was never. And
They didn't fight in the
Yeah,
wars.
there was nothing to worry about there.
You might have just didn't know.
So I think where we are today, we make things difficult.
Yes.
Where if we were to live back closer to Scripture, things are real simple, real plain.
Yes.
We would never have a question of, well, who's that, or why are they dressed that way? We're like,
Right.
there was never an opportunity to mix unless you were purposefully going out
Looking.
and purposefully trying to be something you weren't, which then it's just only sin. There's no
Standing
like
out.
debates. It's either sin or not sin back then. Where now we're like, it's your work uniform, or well, I know you're shaped funny and that's the best thing that fits you. You know, I get the arguments, but it's just such a totally different world we live in. And I think if we had less of this world and more of Bible world, everything would be a little easier.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what little tidbit here as far as pants and if I remember correctly, I watched a documentary where they came from were from horsemen. It was either Attila the Hun or Genghis Khan. Their horsemen would wear pants, and it was considered in that time you were a barbarian if you wore pants. So
Yeah, I don't know if
So-
that applies to
I know I'm just talking about the issue in our culture today is, oh,
Yeah.
should a woman wear pants?
Yeah,
Well,
and it really don't say what it is. I mean,
Right.
But it's talking. I think it's talking what's inside coming out, and I'm pretty sure that's what it is. Because if you go like I said with Messiah Yeshua, it's like telling what's in the heart overflows. Let's just go with that, because that's going to be the ultimate of what's on your outside. You know.
22:9 vineyard and mixing seeds.
cross pollination.
Right. I can't remember right now how many other places it talks about mixing seeds and not mixing seeds, but this one is specific to the vineyard. Right. Look up the Hebrew word; it's straight up vineyard. So in terms of us worried about mixing seeds and things, at least for this command, it's just talking about your vineyard seeds. And then 22:12 tassels, the four corners of your garment, and the question is, the way we typically show our obedience to this command, right? Are we sure that we're doing this the right way, or are we fulfilling this command properly by doing it this way? Right. Unless we put them on our shirts or, I mean, I personally think that we could do better if we put more effort into it, but, you know, is this sufficient? I mean, or are we just being lazy, so to speak? Just like, hey, let's just put them on.
But you are doing it. So
Right.
It's not that you're not doing it.
Right. It's not that I'm not doing it.
All right, now what's the point of doing that anyway?
To remember the commands.
All right,
And
so
just,
so are you
obedience.
concentrating on that, or what you're looking like with those on? Tassels?
I don't care what I look like. I've worn the super long ones to work one day because I couldn't find the short one.
Well, I think Elohim cares about you following what that means, and what long, short on your thing, or maybe you got to wear a tunic or whatever it is. Because you know, like the Jewish people, they have like a shirt that has these four corners underneath their clothes,
Yeah.
because they don't believe in hooking them to your belt loops and stuff. So, but the point is, they're not following Messiah. You know what I'm saying? So they're like, so the heart of the matter is, wear them the best way you can. But the thing about it is, try to serve Him 100% with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. You know, don't let the distraction of, okay, I got it right or not. Oh no, that's the enemy.
I mean,
distracting
I
you
think
and
we still
stuff.
got to focus on whether we got it right or not. To brush off.
Why?
Because he's super specific.
Are you gonna
about
ever? Are
certain
you gonna
things.
ever think that you're gonna get it right
Well,
until He comes
To
back?
me, that shows the heart, though. If you're not willing to put the effort into getting it right, then your heart.
well,
Well,
part
the
of
thing
it
is,
there.
you need to. The heart is getting to know Him.
Well, can I address
Not
it?
the
Part of
tassels.
part of that the road you go down when you do that is just like with a lot of the Jewish community, they don't even have a blue strand in theirs because
They
they
don't
don't
know
know what color blue.
Exactly. What color
Because
blue.
if they put a
Yes.
different color blue in there, they feel they violate
Mhm.
the rule or law. But actually, in a sense, they violate it by not even trying to put the color in there. So how far do you go down that road, and it does become a distraction away from other things in your
That's right.
walk. Just a thought.
And the
Right.
thing is if you go to Him and pray about it, He'll tell you what you need to do.
Right. And also,
Now you might not look like what He told somebody else to do,
agreed.
but don't worry about that. Worry about what you're doing and go to Him, and He'll tell you. I've never asked Him a question that He don't
Right.
answer.
Right.
Might not like the answer.
Yeah.
He tells me.
Because I've had the
Yeah.
thought plenty of times of kind of going to him in prayer, like, is this sufficient enough? Do you want me to like put them on all my shirts or buy tunics that actually have four corners
Yeah.
and put them on the tunics
Yeah.
and then wear that? I've never gotten the push to go that far.
There you go.
There you go. Answer.
It's like stirring the pot, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, you like that pot stirring. I give you a big old spoon for that thing.
Yeah.
We like it though, Ryan. We like the challenge.
That's right. That's right. And speaking about the pans that you mentioned, I think that was the situation back then, that there were not really any pans, or it was more like a ropes,
Yeah,
right?
a tunic,
I kind of wonder, actually, let's say in the times of Yeshua, what was the differentiation between a robe that man was wearing versus a woman? What do we have any examples? Do we know?
Whatever we see in the movies. I guess.
Well, whatever we see from the movies.
Hollywood
Yeah.
movie.
And the thing is you probably had a couple of layers to him because they didn't. What did he tell them when they went to go do the gospel in twos? Don't bring nothing but yourselves, right? What did he say? Just bring our bag.
Yeah.
Yeah, extra tunic. Yeah, so they probably had something underneath, because for warmth and stuff, and then they could peel the layers off as they needed it, because probably in the desert, like when they're traveling, get hot during the day, cool at night. So, but I think there might have been another layer for like a woman, because we have this top area. Like I said, I don't want to get, but us women know that we have to kind of, they didn't probably have the underneath garments like we have today. So as far as that's concerned, it might have been a little different that way, and a little bit of like cute little ties on the side versus like the men, they just had it plain. So that you splitting hairs on what it looks like. It's just, don't be a woman, and if you're a man, stay a man. If you're a woman, stay a woman. That's all. That's all.
Very easy.
Splitting
Yeah.
hairs is just gonna mess your brain all
There's
up.
no confusion of genders in the scripture.
That's right.
There's two.
Yeah, don't be considered. And you see the beard thing too. Now, some women might have a problem
You're
with that.
picking on me.
like as far as like they have some kind of hormone imbalance, but at the same time, that's going to be a separateness too. That ones with the beards and 5 o'clock shadow. Okay, they're men. That kind of thing.
Yeah. That's I was most of my life without beer, but I can see kind of what, now looking back, what the world is doing with that, and what God actually trying to differentiate us and things like that. Anyway, so as far as the clothing, I think that we have now even a bigger problem in our society than just the skirts and pants. Like I sometimes see guys having pants, but then having them halfway down, and I'm like, okay, that's interesting, And but anyway,
That's right. So there's even obscene clothing for the two people, the men and the women these days. Probably obscene stuff back then. So see, it gets to the point where you stay a man and be respectable at the same time as a man and a woman.
That's
Just
right.
go with that.
Modesty, respect, honor.
There you
Yes, amen.
Wear a belt.
And let me see. And what Ryan was talking about the seeds and not mixing the different seeds, and that's another thing that I've been myself recently researching, as God is teaching me about how to make bread, and I'm looking at different seeds, and so I'm actually discovering that most of our bread today is made out of seeds that are, it's called hard red and hard white seeds. Wheat, hard red wheat, and so then I was like, I wonder where is this white, the hard white, where does that come from, And then I started discovering, and that's I would say vast majority of our bread is made from that today in the grocery stores. And I started discovering that that's just another a mixing of things and removing chromosomes and things like that actually didn't exist. That's an man-made invention.
Is it the red being bleached that makes it white? Is that what it is?
No, what they did is they took the red and they removed one of the chromosomes or something
Color
to
part.
create the white.
Oh.
Yeah, yeah. So,
The purest one is the red,
well,
compared to the white. Anyway.
relatively, because then I've found even the red one is relatively like a modern, that it also got some hot tinkered, and so before that you have a spelt, right? And then so the oldest one that right now I'm finding out is actually it's called einkorn. It's the like oldest uninterrupted grain that exists. But so the reason I was like, so why are we sticking with these grains that are ancient, that we've had for forever? So I've discovered that they actually are taking this new modern breeds that they're using. They're actually easier to harvest with combines, and also, but then they are not protected against the pests. So they have to now use a lot of like pesticides to, so it's a mess.
It is.
It's a mess. And I need to stop.
Okay.
One thing, when it talks about mixing and stuff like that, a few years back I kind of did some research because it talks about different cattle and don't mix different animals and different, seeds and things like that. Because what it ends up, when God created something, it was good. He said, leave it alone. What I did, it's good. When you start crossing things, they become inferior to what was originally was created. And so like when they cross a lion and a tiger and you get this liger, it's bigger and everything, but it's not as good as what God initially created. And so same with, I would imagine if you had a vineyard of two different types of grapes, they would cross-pollinate. You end up with a grape that's not as good as what originally God intended.
That's another thing I've been finding out, that a lot of the fruit in the grocery stores, so they actually are breeding the fruits to the sweeter versions, so that the sugar content now is way higher than what it was, let's say, 50 years ago.
But it doesn't have the nutritional value that the original orange or
Mm.
whatever had, yeah?
Yeah.
It looks nicer, tastes better, but less nutritional value. It's also to mass produce it. It grows faster, like you said, at some point, keeps the insects away from it, or just it could be harvested quicker, make more money. It's breed is what pushes it, I think.
I comment about stirring the pot, just to make sure that I mean that in a good way. I think stirring the pot is a good thing. Don't let things get stagnant or settle too
Like
much.
you're making stew.
We just get set in our ways and stuff. Who knows? Maybe one year God will make a push to we just start wearing tunics and we do the whole tzitzit thing differently. Who knows? I don't know if we're going to talk about this because children are in the
Bring it
room,
up, you can talk about it.
but that's
Oh, yeah, they-
22:13 through 17, and the proving of a woman's, you know what? There you go. It's a good term. Let's go with maidenhood.
Right?
So
We can keep it to where we got words that are
right.
don't understand.
Yeah.
Yeah, there we
So
go.
My question is.
We understand, but they don't.
So, I believe I asked this to Ashley, but she honestly wasn't sure either. Or the answer, no, the answer she gave me, I still didn't understand. So, so that's section 22:13 through 17. I'm not understanding how one proves the maidenhood of another.
Got it. So on a wedding night, there's supposed to be a cloth laid down, so
White.
when a virgin is no longer a virgin, then you have blood. And so it's on the cloth, it's given to the father.
If it's never happened, how do you prove something that's never happened?
Well, then it wasn't.
There's no blood there.
Then, yeah, there's no blood. And then also, there's always the side story where maybe before they got married, the woman would prick her finger and put blood on the cloth.
Yeah, like for instance, if she messed
There's
around before she got
proof the wedding night.
before the wedding night and he thought she was a virgin, there would be no blood. But
Right.
if she was a virgin, it would be blood. Unless, like he said, she tricked it by putting her
Well,
finger and sticking it on
so-
the
Well,
thing.
let's say the two, they got together.
It's
before
not
the
always
wedding
the
night
case, but
because he would know that
scientifically,
he was
but-
with her.
but-
And
Right, okay.
that's what they would do. But they have to give proof their wedding night. At least
Then
Yeah, I
then the girl's father and her mother shall take and bring out the evidence of the girl's maidenhood,
That would be it.
which would mean nothing to me, because the blood would show the opposite.
No, showing that she's a maiden.
showing that she.
I mean,
So
not.
why would they have that?
Well, it's
because
after
given
that.
to
act.
them.
Yeah, the
Uh-huh.
see the culture, and they did this on a movie. But I ain't gonna mention that movie because I don't want to give
Yeah,
them
yeah.
the credit. It's not a bad movie, but it's not a good movie. It's secular. But the people when they had weddings back then, they lasted like
Mhm.
days. Yeah, and then the family would stand around this tent when they went to go consummate,
Mhm.
for that reason to make sure everything's cool. They're married and all that stuff. So people are outside the tent waiting on this
Yeah.
either proof or no proof, and then they go home after that many days of partying or whatever. So that's what the deal is. It's right then and there. So after they're done with their
hmm
love, yeah, then they come out the tent,
So
and or the guy does. Maybe she just goes to sleep or whatever, and then he's like, "Okay, everything's cool. Here it is. Bye. Go home. Leave us alone." You know,
there's
that kinda
13
thing.
through
Yeah.
17 all happening like within an hour or two of everything.
well, it depends on what they
Yeah.
want. The married couple.
Right.
So
it says the man.
until they're done with whatever they're doing, then
the
that's when
man
they come out
comes
the
out
tent.
and publicly defames her and says, "I took this woman,
Yeah.
and I came at her. I did not find her to be a maiden." Then the girl's father and mother shall take and bring out the evidence of the girl's maidenhood. So
Yeah.
why would they have that?
That's all. That's all I know.
It's just a
Yeah.
cultural thing. That's it. And then it's
Because I just kept picturing they're coming out with something that just happened. What proof is that?
no. This is after the act, and then
Whatever.
and this is the people. And I'm not saying they have their little ears to the tent door, unless they were nosy, but they were over there to the side, like away from the tent, but they were in the vicinity, so the parents could go back and that guy could come out and talk to the parents about that. Yeah. The whole community was involved in that situation. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. And that's interesting. We're talking about this whole concept of shame, honor, respect, and so here we have the entire procedure of what, from God's perspective, would be like an honorable thing to do, versus if I compare it to when I was growing up, and it was I call them wild 90s. Yeah.
Say 90s?
90s.
Oh, I thought you said 90s.
90s. Yeah.
Okay. I guess
yeah.
both 90s.
Because what happened in my country, like the whole
It's all the same.
the whole like system collapse. We switched to capitalism and all of that, and like 1990, and then it was like
Yeah.
all of the drugs flooded. Everything you couldn't even before imagine, and so I was kind of like at those times it was like my friends and things like that. It was just almost like the exact opposite of what we're reading right now. Like if there was some, let's say, girl that was still maiden, then it was almost like, oh man, I feel weird. I am, like there was almost some kind of stigma sometimes, and that tells you like how far we are. Yeah, it's bad.
Well, don't you understand though? I mean, don't you think though? Around in the pagan world, who knows what they were doing with women and stuff back then? So that wasn't an issue. It was just about, I guess, her being married to more than one man or something. I don't know, but it was some junky stuff going on in their like around their camp. So this stuff that happens in the 90s and now, this ain't nothing new. They just had different clothes on and different culture stuff. And it might have been even worse. Sometimes they would do stuff all together out in the open. You know? So I don't think. Right, but what I'm saying is he knew about the standard of ugliness and filthiness even back then because they were doing that. That's why he was telling them what to do here, set them apart. And it lets the young ladies that are growing up know it's okay to be saving yourself. Whereas the older cultures might have said, no, young as 9 years old. I mean, where do these people like Muslims and stuff get this ideas for marrying 9-year-old kids and stuff? You know what I'm saying? That's from many years ago. And it's nasty.
So I think that the issue really is like with parents' education, because that was something that I was going through, that there was almost like this vacuum. There was no church. I didn't have any church education. Parents were quiet on the subject. The school, so who fills you in is your friends, and then it depends who your friends are, and so I think that
well,
we need to step up.
well, here's the thing. I think it kind of like it keeps going flippity flop because I think if you look at the culture back in the Roman times and Greeks, they were doing like outwardly perverse things, and they thought everything was cool. That's why I always tell them you can't do this, you can't do that. The people in the congregation thought they could still do all that stuff. But you can't do none of this stuff. That's nasty. You can't do none of that stuff no more.
Our culture's definitely models after the Greek and the
But
Roman
I think when
cultures.
the gospel was being, even if it was done not all the way truth, that kind of helped it bring it to this opposite end where nobody, like in our 20th century, 21st century, then you got it sort of hush-hushed, which now is kind of going back out to where it's real in your face now, like some garbage, You know what I mean? I'm trying to be kids here, but so I don't think it's like it just goes up and down with that, like you said in your household they wouldn't say nothing about it. Well, even back then there's probably households like that. They thought I ain't talking about it, and then you got these other cultures that openly did it out in the kids saw them and everything, Yeah. Yeah.
There's definitely the contrast between God's kingdom and the kingdom of man. Where
Right.
man is carefree and flippity, where God is like, okay, you need to follow these rules, and it's to protect you and for you to be blessed and live righteously. This one verse or story anyway, chapter 25, verse I think it's 7 through 10. But I'll just when the brother is supposed to take his brother's wife after his brother's passed away, and he refuses. This kind of makes me giggle a little bit right here. And he says, "Then his brother's wife shall come to him in the presence of the elders and remove his sandal from his foot and shall spit in his face and answer and say, 'Thus is done to the man who does not build up his brother's house. And in Israel his name shall be called the house of him who had his sandal removed.'" I just thought that was kind of funny. I mean, it was probably serious back then, but because I guess a sandal was a pretty important item back then. But it's just kind of funny. But it's a public humiliation.
Yeah.
Is really what it is.
And that also goes with Ruth. She was a Moabite, and technically, if you go by that first commandment, but they weren't supposed to marry the Moabites or have nothing to do with them. Boaz, he's part of the Israel. But the thing about since he was related to her husband that died, well, first he went to go ask the other guy, the other relative first, to be the redeemer, husband redeemer, and he refused it, that's what that's talking about. He refused it. So technically she could have went over to him and did the sandal thing with the spitting. So Boaz was next in line. So the thing about him not being able to marry her because she's a Moabite canceled out because he could do the kinsman redeeming thing. That's why that was allowed. Because if you think about it, Messiah was out of that lineage, so that was a right thing to do. And he was a righteous man, by the way, too, Boaz. So it wasn't like he was going against the Torah by marrying a Moabite. It wasn't, because he was being the kinsman redeemer at that point. It's cool. That's about how it's not that God changes his laws, but he's very merciful. He wants people to be with him, not against, like not push them away. So I think those show about the Gentile, bringing the Gentiles in with him, even these time periods, It's about all nations.
Quick question on that one. Is it did he marry her as a Moabite, or was she converted in as an Israelite, then they got married?
She was-
Because if she would have adhered to, she became one of God's chosen, then they were married, it would no longer be breaking the law
Right.
that was already prescribed. So I think a lot of times when we speak on it, we say, well, once they were married, he like converted her at that time, where I think it's more of because the prohibition is if she was still a Moabite, it would have been like, no, you can't do that. But she said, I'm not that group of people anymore. I'm your group of people. Now we can get married.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
But the thing about the spiritual aspect, it doesn't change the status of she's a Moabite by ethnicity, Spiritually, that's what you're talking about, and that's what the Father wants, the spiritual part of everything, not just these dogma things, He wants that spiritual heart. And she even told Ruth that I'm going to lay down, I want to serve your God. So right there, she's like saying, hey, I want you to be my God. So you're right. She was under the Father, and but if people see back then, he had to meet with these elders to remember, he had to talk with them before he married her. So he went through the criteria, just like when Messiah would tell people go back to the high priest and get let them know what happened about like leprosy or whatever. It wasn't that his stuff didn't work. He was just saying, I follow the Torah. Yeah. This Boaz, he was a righteous man. He followed the Torah. So, but at the same time, the Torah is about the heart of the matter. It's not about just things, And then the proof's right there because the Messiah is out of that lineage, These people like Rahab that's got this ugly past they brought into his fold. Once they accept him as king, or master,
Anybody have anything else?
Uh, 25:3 talks about the 40 stripes may be given to him, but not more or less. Obviously, that's that other connection forward into Yeshua. But from the last Torah study that I wasn't here for, and a few back now, we've had the mention of the 40 as a period of testing or the number of testing. So I've made that correlation there of, yes, you will receive a punishment, but only up to the point of testing, and nothing past that, because then after that, you'd be into the category of wrath or anger. Like even with our own children, you're supposed to discipline them, but not to but we have to do it, the adults have to do it with the right heart.
Yeah.
We can't do it out of anger.
Not to provoke them or and stuff like that. Yeah.
Right. So then as you're kind of seeing that played out, the 40 there, you see obviously the future image of Yeshua, but you also see, hey, this is just up to the point of testing. You get to deal with what you get to deal with, and then that's your consequence. This won't be any more than that. So just an interesting little connection.
I'll leave it to this one last question. I definitely got more, but Deuteronomy 24:17. Do not twist the right ruling of a stranger or the fatherless. I don't know what that means. Do not twist the right ruling of a stranger
Laws.
or the fatherless.
Was the laws? So, like, was the, yeah.
Mhm.
Don't-
Okay, so it's
Very
not the right ruling of the strangers. It's he's referring to his right ruling. Do not twist the right ruling that I gave you.
Right.
I don't know. It's just the wording of it says of a stranger, the right ruling of a stranger. So it's like the stranger's giving me right ruling, and I'm not supposed to twist it.
Here's another reading of that from the Complete Jewish Bible. You are not to deprive the foreigner or the orphan of the justice which is his due. And you are not to take a widow's clothing. You know.
'Cause you do see when, by the time Yeshua comes around, widows are being treated differently, and the orphans and things like that. They're not taking care of the people they should be taking care of.
Yeah, and the strangers looked at too at Messiah's time as like good. The Samaritans and all that.
It is. They wouldn't be in charge of the strangers' laws, only in charge of the father's laws.
So this is about the weights and measures. I think more spiritually, weights and measures, because you know how there's the all Torah and all grace. It has to be a balance, right? So uneven weights and measures. If you're like bearing people in mind, you know, Torah, but you're not showing grace, then you're this side. You're all the way up here. But then there's the all grace, all grace. You don't have to do anything like that anymore. You could just ask for forgiveness and do whatever you want, blah, 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 blah. Then there's too much grace. So there has to be a balance. So I think maybe in a spiritual sense, the Father's like, I want you to be balanced in this. I want you to follow me, but still show grace and still show my grace through my Son. And 'cause there has to be Yeshua. It has to be through him, and that's it. So, and we learn through his Holy Spirit. So, I don't know, that's just a little thought that comes to mind when I read on the weights and measures. I always think of a more spiritual aspect. So that's just my 2 shekels.
I like that. Well, that's all in the scripture. If you look at it, that kind of yeah, it's all important. You know, all of it's important. One thing.
All right. Well, the half Torah is Isaiah chapter 54, verses 1 through 10. Isaiah 54, 1 through 10. Sing, O barren one, you who did not bear. Break forth into singing and cry aloud, you who have not been in labor. For the children of the deserted one are more than the children of the married woman, said Jehovah. Enlarge the place of your tent, and let them stretch out the curtains of your dwellings. Spare not, lengthen your cords, and strengthen your stakes, for you shall break forth to the right and to the left, and your seed inherit the nations. And make the deserted cities inhabited. Do not fear, for you shall not be put to shame, nor hurt. You shall not be humiliated for the shame of your youth. You shall forget and not remember the reproach of your widowhood anymore. For your maker is your husband, Yahweh of hosts is his name, and the set apart one of Israel is your Redeemer. He is called the Elohim of all the earth. For Yahweh has called you like a woman forsaken and grieved in spirit, like a wife of youth when you were refused, declares your Yahweh, or your Elohim. For a little while I have forsaken you, but with great compassion I shall gather you. In an overflow of wrath I hid my face from you for a moment. But with everlasting loving commitment I shall have compassion on you, said Yahweh your Redeemer. For this is the waters of Noah to me, in that I have sworn that the waters of Noah would never again cover the earth. So have I sworn not to be wroth with you, nor to rebuke you. For though the mountains be removed and the hills be shaken, my loving commitment is not removed from you, nor is my covenant of peace shaken, says Yahweh, who has compassion on you.
Okay, I'll just read some margin notes from the CJB here. Seeing barren woman who has never had a child. In this chapter, Yeshayahu looks forward to the return from captivity and the future time of final restoration when, quote, your descendants will possess the nations and inhabit the desolated cities, end quote. God sums up Israel's history of suffering and final restoration with the words, briefly I abandoned you, but with great compassion I am taking you back. I was angry for a moment, but with everlasting grace I will have compassion on you. Yeshayahu looks forward to a time when God will never be angry at Israel again, and Israel will have no fear of the Gentile nations. In the absence of God's anger is as sure as his promise never to flood the earth again, and this restoration will create shouts of joy among God's people. Hallelujah.
Also shows a God that is loyal to his commitments and to his covenant that he's promised his people. You know, he's going to stand by his word. Right. Sometimes it takes him 70 years to bring his people back. He does, or even longer.
Still loves them. Out with them.
Interesting that he brings up Noah and how he reminds us that he has made that commitment that he won't flood the earth again for the sake of man.
That's I think, a wonderful example for us, because the scripture says that we are supposed to imitate the Father, imitate Messiah, and kind of just follow what they're doing, and then you will, if you follow in the same direction, you're gonna be in good place. And so here, we have the example where half of the 10 tribes they are sent away. They get sent away, but you can see the heart of God is still for them to be reunited one day and gathered. So I would say, as long as those Israelites don't do as long as they don't get themselves into another covenant and things like that, they can be actually restored back. So that's I think that's the pattern kind of. It doesn't always happen. We're not perfect. We make mistakes and all of that. But if we actually follow in his patterns and his ways, it will pay off at the end. So glory to God for that.
Yeah. Well, the thing too, I don't know who read it. I think Jonathan might have read it in one of the verses about you will have persecution, or is that you, Ted? You? All right, Ted said that. So you gotta understand that. See, that's why a lot of people I think get distracted. Like for instance, the Israelites in the wilderness, they didn't have their foods that they liked or whatever the deal was, complaining. I mean, it's really not persecution, but they couldn't even handle that. So just imagine the persecution of them, being captured and all this stuff. They got to withstand all that. So yeah, I mean, if you follow his ways, even through the persecution, that's how you're to be doing good too. It ain't just all roses as you're following him. When you're doing his ways, because you're gonna look different, you're gonna be attacked, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so I was kind of reading through this, and of course I was getting huge Israel and Genesis kind of connections, but then for a moment I thought of something different, so I'll share that. So it's funny how the verse starts. Verse 7, for a brief moment I deserted you, but with great compassion I will gather you. In overflowing anger for a moment I hid my face from you, but with everlasting love I have compassion on you, says the Lord, your Redeemer. This is like the days of Noah to me. So the Noah was the connection immediately, but then it kind of brought the other thoughts. So Matthew 24:37 says, for as were the days of Noah, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. And as I was reading that through again, it kind of reminded me of the same verbiage of when Yeshua was on the cross, and the Father says, I had to turn my face from you for a moment. All the sin, all the curse was had to be on you, and I had to turn away because I couldn't deal with you in that moment. But then it says it was just for a moment, and then he turned around and it's back to immediate super duper love. Everything's back where it should be, and things are in order. But it had to be that way for a moment. And the language in here, it kind of says, like it was just for a moment I deserted you, but then also an overflowing anger for a moment. So both of those are happening simultaneously, and both for a moment. I had to turn, super crazy angry, but it's because he's dealing with all the sin of all the world all at once. So it is overflowing anger, but then also just the fact that it's an eternal covenant. One of those, it's kind of obvious words in there, but it's one of those ones that's not done away with like any of the other ones. But I just got really big feelings on that being like Yeshua on the cross, and like that verbiage being exactly the same, and then that the days of Noah being the coming of the Son of Man. So it's happening there. It happened in real time when he was on the cross, but then there's still that future prophecy coming when he comes back. Number 2.
If you think about it, so back then when Isaiah's prophesying, like just say he's in the street prophesying this or whatever, in some type of open atmosphere with the people, they're disregarding what he's saying. They don't care what he's saying. They're not repenting. The Father told him when he was going to be a prophet, you're going to be my prophet for X amount of years, lots of years. They will not change. And I have it that way because they got to face their consequences of their stuff. So they're just being told all this good stuff, the stuff with warnings, but like the thing about Noah, and how he has compassion on. They're like walking around like, I don't care. I want to do my own thing. I don't care. We're like, we have to be careful of that kind of stuff with us too, because when he tells us truth and all this stuff, and amidst all this going on in our life, and we're walking around thinking we've got it all made in the shade, when he's got people telling us what Father's telling them, or whatever, or the Word's telling us that stuff, we have to be very careful, because we're looking at this like these people are going, yeah, that's wonderful, but they're rejecting what Isaiah's telling them. They're rebellious and prideful and defiant. They're going about their business. And, right, yeah. Distracted by things that don't pertain to the Father. And then, so that's what's going on. We always think it's got to be like, it's real simple, but it's very, because you're fighting against your flesh. And these people, they're already got it made up in their mind that they don't want to serve God, Yahweh.
And I don't know if Joe was watching me. He's like, no, 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 press the button.
He's not here.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, as soon as you got done saying that, it made me think of Revelation, when God sits there and he puts all of these plagues on everybody, and he puts all this fire and all this stuff happening, and the fire and the brimstone and the hornets and all these creatures, and it says, but they still wouldn't repent. I mean, like, you see all of this stuff happening, and you still won't
And they're
repent.
talking trash to him, too. on top of
Exactly.
that.
So
Yeah.
that brings me to, like, these people are complete reprobates, and they have a completely seared conscience, which brings me back to Romans 1. These are going to be the same kind of people. They're just, like, completely cut off. They will not repent no matter what happens. They will rather walk around like the Walking Dead with bites in them, and to the point where they would wish for death. And this is just my opinion.
Yeah.
But to the point where they wish for death, that they'll actually try to kill themselves, but it won't happen. So, like, you'll be seeing people walking around like bullet holes in their heads, but they still won't die. And yet they still won't repent.
Yeah.
It just blows my mind. Of course, I was like that at one time. So,
And back then, that's what was going on too. I mean, they might not have had the visual bullets and stuff showing, but they're just walking around like, oh, we got Isaiah over here. You know, this Looney Tune guy keeps talking about nobody's changing. Nobody's listening to him. Why does he keep talking? Because the Father told him to do that. He's obeying the Father. And he's doing it. Nobody's changing. Nobody's coming up repenting. They probably they might even throw a tomato or so at him, you know? So it's like, that's what's going on.
I think
Yeah.
part of the reason why the Father has him prophesied anyway, has him write it, is for us.
Yeah.
And it's for the people that will come back from Babylon.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
the hope.
The
He's giving
future
them hope.
generation, because that generation is like,
He's like, I'm going
listen
to
to
send you off, because in Jeremiah he does the same thing. I'm going to send you guys off,
yeah.
and you're going to be there a while, but I'm going to bring you back. So it's that hope. As we read it, he's going to come for us and bring us home.
And we see him being compassionate. Like, never mind the people, but him. He is glorified because he's the one keeping his. Talking about the things that he's done for these people that are they don't care, you know? They don't care.
That's a really good word for any of us who are preaching the word of God or sharing the word of God, doing the things that we see are instructed in the word of God, because sometimes it's just it is a little bit of depressing, and you just feel like, I'm about to throw the towel in, or I'm not gonna, I don't see, no one is changing, I don't see any improvements, and it can be discouraging. So kind of seeing with Isaiah now what kind of impact it has on future generations, that's an encouraging word.
Well, I believe he was probably going to the Father and probably praying all the time to him, because that's where his strength came from to do this. That's the only strength just a regular person would be like, I'm not doing this no more. It ain't even working. You already told me, Father, it ain't gonna work. They're not gonna change. So why am I doing it? He's obeying the Father. That's the ultimate thing. If whether nobody follows or you're obeying and doing his work, that's what matters. Okay? It's not about counting people and, right. I mean, it's about others, but it's not about others validating what the Father tells you to do. He tells you to do it, and you do it. You don't go and ask a man if it's okay to do what God told you to do. You do what God said you do. And then, like I said, I believe have strength for that many, I think it was 40 years or more. He did all this. So just like Jeremiah too, prayer, 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 being in constant relationship and communication with the Father, and then the Father and Messiah would download that strength to get through these years. You know, there was probably frustrating in their flesh, frustrating in their spirit. They knew they were doing the work of the Father. So that the spirit trumps the flesh if you allow it to. Yeah, flesh, get out of the way. And listen to the spirit. Yeah, that kind of thing. Hmm? Yeah. Yeah, you got to talk to the flesh. Say, hey, I ain't having it today. Just like the enemy or whatever. That's right.
So the New Testament portion is Matthew chapter 24, verses 29 through 42. I think maybe Jonathan read ahead. Uh-huh.
29 through 42. Okay, so. And immediately after the distress of those days, the sun shall be darkened, and the moon shall not give its light, and the stars shall fall from the heaven, and the powers of the heaven shall be shaken. Then the sign of the son of Adam shall appear in the heaven, and then all the tribes of the earth shall mourn. They shall see the son of Adam coming in the clouds of the heaven with power and much esteem. And he shall send his messengers with a great sound of a trumpet, and they shall gather together his chosen ones from the four winds, from one end of the heavens to the other. Now learn this parable from the fig tree. When its branch has already become tender and puts forth leaves, you know that the summer is near. So you also, when you see all these, know that he is near at the doors. Truly, I say to you, this generation shall by no means pass away until all this takes place. If heaven and earth shall pass away, but my word shall by no means pass away. But concerning that day and the hour no one knows, not even the messengers of the heavens, but my Father only. And as the days of Noah, so also shall the coming of the Son of Adam be. For as they were in the days before the flood, eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day that Noah entered into the ark, they did not know until the flood came and took them all away. So also shall the coming of the Son of Adam be. Then two shall be in the field, the one is taken and one is left. Two women shall be grinding at the mill, one is taken and one is left. Watch therefore, for you do not know what hour your master is coming. And you know, like in verse 38, we look at that, or sometimes I guess, and say, well, was anything wrong with like eating and drinking and marrying and giving in marriage? Well, those types of things aren't wrong, but if they're a distraction in your life, keeps you from having a relationship with the Father to know when those signs are happening, things are happening around you, where His Son's coming back to rule. You know, that's what the problem is. Those are just distractions versus you're doing it because there's nothing wrong with those things. You know, just what place in their lives are they first or are they second? You know. So I got out of that.
There's definitely a lot of controversy in this chapter about certain topics, but I find where it says he sends a messenger with a great sound of a trumpet, and they shall gather together his chosen ones from the four winds, from one end of the heavens to the other. That's going to be a big trumpet that angels are going to bring and make a loud sound and gather his children together. It's going to be an awesome moment.
So interestingly enough, I've been reading through this section before I knew that was the Torah portion for today.
Being led by the Spirit.
I guess so. So one of the concepts that have been kind of mulling around in my brain is the verse 29. Immediately after those days, the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened and the moon will not give its light, and the stars will fall from the heaven and the power of heavens will be shaken. Because right after that it talks about then the Son of Man will appear. So I didn't write down the reference, but it talks about like the new heaven and new earth, the new Jerusalem. There's no need for a sun because he will be all the light that we'll need. And I've always kind of read this section as like very like apocalyptic. You know, the sun loses the gas that makes it burn, and the moon doesn't shine because there's no sun or whatever. You know, like the real scary like Left Behind type movie stuff where there's like blood moons and all that. But I've been kind of wondering because the verse that follow talks about then he will appear, and if he's like on the mountain with a Moses or the Mount of Transfiguration, he's his own light source. So if he's there, then what if he's so bright that our version of what's too bright, we look in the sun and our eyes don't work anymore if we do that too long? That's our version of bright. And God / Yeshua in this story comes down. He's like, the sun is nothing compared to me. That's a lesser light. You know, when I show up, there's no need for the sun. The sun, it's dark in comparison to me being here. The moon, there is no light for the moon to show because I'm all encompassing brightness. I had never really put those two kind of thoughts and concepts together, but not to say that it has to be what it is. It was just a new wrinkle to that story for me, where it's always just been like, you know, the comets are falling from the sky and the volcano blows up and now there's a cloud cover and you can't see the sun. You're like, well, what if it's the opposite? What if God's glory is so awesome, you know, like the opposite side of the spectrum, that, yeah, the sun looks like nothing. It's just like, you know, has no comparison to him showing up and being there.
So I do like that description, but in my mind, I kind of see it as, okay, so the sun will not give its light, or the sun will be blocked out and the moon will not give its light. It seems a lot to me like you were to put it in a more physical rather than spiritual way, because it can go both ways. I mean, honestly, but seems like it could be a solar eclipse, because it's literally what happens during one. The sun is blocked out, and obviously by the moon, but the moon is not giving any source of light whatsoever. But yeah, it could be that too. I mean, that's the thing. Like, there's a lot of maybes, but I do like that. I like that explanation.
So the only pushback I'll have on that is because right after it says then the stars will fall from heaven and the powers of heaven will be shaken, and I know a lot of times when they talk about the stars, they could be the angels. So that's why I have tried to allow my brain to move past that thought, which I still think is probably the most obvious, like a solar eclipse or like, you know, volcano or something. But because there's so much more going on, it's not just, oh, solar eclipse, we see those all the time. This one, stars are falling out of the sky, things are going crazy, heaven is shaking. So that's why I said maybe it's something new or something that we haven't experienced before, like Yeshua, God just being so darn bright. The sun's like, I can't even hold a light to him, literally.
I didn't even realize I said that when he brought that to my attention. So Matthew 24:40, when it says, "At that time there will be two men in the field, one will be taken and one will be left." That's not the rapture. A lot of people, a lot of people. That's what I'm up here. A lot of people think that word "taken" means raptured, but in context, it means killed. If you read in context where it talks about how the days of Noah, like all these different people were killed, but if you read in context, that's what's going to happen. One will be there, one will be left, and the other will be taken, which means killed. if you read it in context. It's not rapture.
Right.
So, yeah, because that word taken doesn't mean raptured. If you really look it up, it means killed or swept away or brought away in judgment or something like that. So it doesn't mean raptured.
But
Well-
one of the can't find it, but they ask him, where are they? And he says, where the buzzards, it's in a different gospel, I think, where the buzzards are gathering together or something like that. Wherever dead bodies is, there the vultures shall be gathered
Gathered
together,
together, yeah.
and immediately after after the distress, those days, then. So yeah, might not be good to be one of those taken out or taken away.
Well, the part right here, this is going into another area, but so the sun shall be darkened and the moon shall not give its light. Yeah, and that could be a big possibility that it's that brightness of Messiah, you know. And the stars shall fall from the heaven. Well, if you look at Isaiah 24:23 and all that, then you go into like all these other ones because I got it. There's a bunch of them like Isaiah, Job, Joel, and references Haggai. Let's see here, Daniel also. So there's a type of spiritual warfare going on too when he's coming back. It ain't just about us on earth. He's shaking everything up in these different realms and showing who he is. And he's going to put it into this mess that they're part of, you know? I mean, of course, huh? No, I know that, but we just read it as just, okay, it's just human beings he's shaking up. I mean, of course, we have to be careful how we're living our life right now so we don't get his wrath, you know? What I'm trying to say, though, is we have to be careful to see there's multi things that's going to be happening when he comes back because he's shaking up the whole universe. You know, it is not just about just Earth, you know. But Earth plays a big part because we're his image on it, and that's the whole point of what the whole story is about is trying to get us back into relationship with him so we can dwell with him again, you know. So all that ties into that, you know.
I wanted to look up in Blue Letter Bible that verse that you just said, Lisa. And I was like, I wonder what, left. So I ended up, stop it. I ended up looking that up and the Strong's definition, but the biblical usage of that is to bid going away or depart of a husband divorcing his wife. That's pretty intense. I feel like that's
Breaking the covenant or something, you know.
So in 35, this is a reference we all are probably familiar with, but heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. So, we have this future-minded, earlier, and forgive me, the reference is lost on my brain, but not one jot or tittle or will pass away until heaven and earth. And then
5, I think.
Matthew 5. And then then it's saying now this has happened. Right. Heaven and earth has passed away. And he's like, but even still, my words are still here.
Eternal.
So it's one of those like it shows the multifaceted side of the word, right? We have the word, then we have the Bible, then we have Yeshua being the word, and he's like, hey, I was here at the beginning. I'm here for the whole story, and I'm going to be here after the story. And, the future of whatever the Bible hasn't written yet about, because it just tells us, future, and then eternity in the future. We don't really have, like, in the year 9 gazillion, this is what we're going to look like. So it's just super a strong, not a connection, but a something, you know, where it's like the laws are written on our heart, right? And that's just more of the word. So we just have kind of like a pastor's PowerPoint slide. It's all about Yeshua and Jehovah in the beginning, and it'll be about him in the end. So you see, like, there's no separating the two, the story and the human and spiritual side of Jesus, Yeshua's. There's no ever departure of that from day one of existence all the way through the whole story, through the second coming, and seeing him in his ultimate version. You know, like, he's like, first time I came to love on you guys, this time I'm handling business. But then it still goes back to love after that. You know, so he right. And, you know, all the verses where it's like, well, in the beginning was the word. You're like, oh, okay, cool. Nothing will pass away until all these things happen. Okay, cool. Now things have passed away, still here. And so, you know, the shift, the focus, the attention is always in the same point, which kind of reminds me of that verse where it talks about sin is missing the mark. You know, so we still have the 44,000 denominations, Messianic versus, you know, Christian, Catholic, whatever. There's still like a pinpointed direction for us to go where this is the only answer. And we can dance around the bullseye all day, but he's saying the mark has never changed. And I just love that full-bodied exposure that Yeshua makes the whole Bible narrative of everything about it. And he's like, hey, anytime you miss me on the bullseye,
Yeah.
that's a sin. And
Yeah,
it's all about me.
It goes all like that. Genesis to Revelation.
Got something, Redeem?
Let's see. I don't even know if I have anything. They like how Yeshua there explains that, you know, that no one, in the verse 36, but of the day and hour no one knows, not even the angels of heaven, but my Father only. Like Yeshua teaching us about the ultimate omniscient of our Father in heaven, omniscience, and that's connected, I think, also to that light. Jonathan was talking about the passage in Revelation where it explains, like, there is it explains that one day we're not going to be in need of any light, because the Father is going to be the ultimate light, and then next to him, Yeshua, it says, describes him as a lamp. So those two lights will provide the light for us. And I think that also, that's the reason, I think, why the Father is actually sending only Yeshua on the seventh day for the last 1,000 years back, because I think that that's the only light that we are able to actually even, what's the word I'm looking for, absorb, be in presence of, versus we know the Father, actually, we're going to be with the Father only on the 8th day, after the last 1,000 years. So that's, and anyway, there's a lot of different kind of stories that intrigue me about what's even happening in heaven, that some people describing, even who had a visits to heaven, that it's just all about actually getting closer to the presence of the Father and Messiah. But also you have to be, like, there has to be a, what is it I'm looking for, either cleansing yourself or be devoting yourself more and more. So you are able to absorb the light, to be closer. It's, yeah, I think you guys get the picture.
Like Moses being close to the fire, he came off the mountain and he was glowing.
Yes. That's just a small glimpse of what heaven is kind of about, you know. And then let me see. And then I think it was Angela. You were talking about the verse about the eating and drinking. Where's that verse?
It will, let's see, yeah, that's in 38, verse 38.
38. Yeah. Oh, that's why I didn't see it. It's on the other side.
Red
But,
letters.
yes. It's
saw
all
you-
red.
I saw you had the red letter edition.
So 38, for as in the days before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day that Noah entered the ark. So I think it's deeper, because as you were saying, people were, even Yeshua was drinking and eating, right? Disciples, some of them married. So I think it's I think talking about inappropriateness of, like, you can be eating in a godly way with having self-control, or you can be, what's the in the overindulging, gluttony. That's what I was looking for. Yeah. And I think that today, if you look at our society, there's a lot of that going on today, but we're kind of we're like almost like we don't want to touch that. We don't want to, it's almost like politically incorrect,
Well, I think what it is, it's not really like based on. I mean, that's similar to what it is. It's like they're in their carnal nature.
Mm-hmm.
Like these are normal things. The actual acts are fine,
Right.
but they're acting carnality in the world. Like they don't notice nothing going on around them, because it says it's got a comma behind, as in the days of Noah ark. Then it goes on to the next verse saying, and they did not know. They weren't aware of what the stuff's going on around them. Distracted. They're in their carnal nature, living out their life for themselves, selfishness. And then it sneaks up on them. Here's the Son of Man coming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's basically a combination.
So I don't think he's
of
going to say, okay, what are you eating? Let me see your menu. It's a matter of, are you being in your carnal nature and not serving him? Or are you, because you're going to miss the mark. You're going to miss when he's coming.
Yeah.
Distracted.
Yeah, so what I'm trying to say
Yeah.
from my perspective is, I see like that it's a combination of things, that when, like how you said, nothing wrong with eating, we need to
Yeah.
eat. That's the way God made us.
Yeah.
But then if you are, let's say, either you eating the stuff that is not even considered food from the Father's perspective, then you eating actually stuff that you putting something into your temple that is probably disabling you on different levels, so then you
Well-
cannot even see.
But think about it this way, though. There's a lot of people that are health conscious that don't serve God.
Right.
They're very healthy. They'll like, if it ain't like, I don't grow it out of my, or whatever. A lot of health people. And
Yeah.
they worship their health like that. They're like these, and they're not believers. You know what I'm saying?
So
So
there
they
are
mi-
unbelievers who are fasting
So
and
they're-
things like that, right?
Or just
I
eating
sometimes-
very good food, probably better than even maybe some of us Torah people.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? Because they're so involved in how stuff goes in their body. I've met people like that. They just like they very meticulous about how they eat.
Yeah.
know?
Right.
And they're athletic and they exercise and all that kind of stuff.
There
It
needs
has
to be a
that-
balance to everything.
And that's
right?
carnality. That's being in your flesh, because you're worried about everything that's got to do with your body. Like you're trying to live here forever. You know, that kind of thing. Beat the thing. Right. And that's what it's about. It's about, are you horizontal living, or are you
Mm.
being selfish and carnal? Because the eating and drinking, that's just what you got to do. You know, you got to eat something, you got to drink something, you got to marry. You know, you don't have to marry, but if you want to marry, there's nothing wrong with those things. It's just, are your soul thinking on these things? It needs to be on him.
Yeah, I guess like from my perspective, I see that there is a warning in this, that also pay attention. Yes, be in the spirit and be connected, have a relationship with God, but also that comes with pay attention how you eating, how you marrying, how you do it his way, so then you're not one day surprised and you are,
Well, the
you
thing
know,
is, if you're in line
caught.
with him, if you're in line with him, you're going to be doing stuff his way. Now, you can't do, like, for instance, those health people that aren't in his way, they're still doing stuff because that's their choice of just living healthy. But is your reason you're being healthy because you just want to live till you're 100 years old on this earth? You don't care about eternity? Or are you being healthy because you just want to please the Father? You know what I'm saying? That kind of thing. So it's all horizontal to me. It's like, that's how you do it.
It comes at the wrong time, man. So that's why I don't believe in carnal Christian, because you can't be carnal and a Christian.
Right.
Because it'll be the carnal Christians, you know, the bench warmers that have that checked off on the list.
Well, they're
that-
fakers.
That's
they're
what
they're
people,
playing,
that's what I consider a carnal Christian.
playing faith. They're not really doing it.
But so what came to my mind is when we were talking about how the sun will never give its light and the moon will be darkened, it made me think of the plague of darkness in Egypt,
Yeah, yeah.
where like all of Egypt was dark except where God was. Except where God was in the camp. And we were talking about this the other night again. A lot of stuff we were talking about coming up today for some reason. But we were talking about this, how it was just light just in Israel's camp. And
Yeah.
where God dwells, it's light, right?
Yeah.
So then the people in Egypt were like, that's where the mixed multitude came from. They're like, oh, well, you know, I want that. So, and it's like, this was darkness that could be felt. It's going to be the same thing in Revelation.
Well, I was even talking to Chris a couple of days ago, and you remember, don't shake your head. But the thing, like you shake,
Just like, oh.
but like I was saying, maybe these people, like in the other pagan ones around their camp, was kind of looking over, like if they had some kind of long, thing to look over, they probably, oh, that's pretty neat.
Well, yeah,
that
it's dark
fire
everywhere
that's
around them.
hovering over that thing, like that's awesome. Like it's probably nothing they ever seen before. It probably was very intriguing. And then of course the cloud and the cloud in the daytime, right?
Yeah.
So all that was like, like you're saying.
So-
His stuff is so awesome
Mm-hmm.
that you can't describe it, but hey, that's something
And it'll
You
be
know.
like it'll be like
yeah.
like we are talking about how when we're with the Father, that there's not going to be night. There's not going to be any darkness because the Father is light. So is beginning, so in the end.
And since we're throwing the verse around, I figured I'd read it. It's Revelation 21:23. And the city has no need of a sun or moon to shine on it, for the glory of God gives it light, and its lamp is the Lamb. So that was where like that huge connection kind of hit for me was, the verbiage is almost the same, but this one goes a little bit further and says the glory of God gives it light. And you're like, okay, the glory, that's cool. But then it says, and then the lamp is the Lamb. So then it's still, again, about Yeshua, and he is that light, which is kind of where I started to pull that new thought of it's more on the spiritual realm than a physical thing. Because we could kind of explain away a nuke or a volcano, but how do you explain away, that's Jesus, where did the sun go? This is serious brightness, and we are
Yeah.
good to go now.
Daddy's with
The ones us that follow.
Daddy's with them. That's why. Daddy's.
So what is, read that verse again. Come up. Yeah. Go ahead.
And the city has no need of a sun or moon to shine on it, for the glory of God gives it light, and its lamp is the Lamb.
Okay, that last part. Its lamp is the Lamb. So who is the Lamb? Capital L Lamb. So who is the Lamb? Yeshua. What is Yeshua? John 1. In the beginning
That
was
way
the Word.
Yep.
Thy word is a lamp unto my feet,
Yes,
a light
yep.
unto my path.
All right. Good tour study. Want to go ahead and wrap it up unless somebody else has something. Dawn, you got anything to say? You've been,
Look like you're about to, you want to say something.
well, Lisa said y'all had kept talking, the other day. So
Simple is good.
Yeah. All right, let us pray. Abba, Father, we just thank you for today and the Sabbath, and thank you for your word, and thank you for your Spirit ministering to us, and just everybody that participated. Father, I thank you for everybody that came out. I thank you for those that are on online, and so I just lift the rest of this day up to you, Father. Pray your blessing over the service. Lead and guide me in the things you want to minister to your people over, Father. And so I just thank you for all these things in Yeshua's name. Amen. And thank you for everybody online. Thank you for everybody here. Yes.